Jon Snow stood upon the windswept ramparts of Winterfell, the pale rim of dawn still caged behind violet clouds and ice-rimmed battlements. Fresh snow whispered across the stone with a sound like parchment being turned, delicate yet purposeful, as though the old castle itself were eager to read the next page of its own history. Below him, torches flickered in the courtyard where grooms stamped their boots and tightened girths for the new day's ride. The flames clawed at the gloom, orange reflections dancing in shallow puddles half frozen by the night. Just hours ago he had spoken vows beneath the reddened leaves of the heart tree, binding his life, and more perilously his duty, to Daenerys Targaryen. The words still rang in his ears, fragile as spun glass and just as dangerous to mishandle. He pressed gloved fingers to the frost-slick merlon and breathed the stern air of the north, letting its bite remind him who he was and who he had been. Bastard, ranger, lord commander, king in all but name, and now husband to the Dragon Queen. A chill more intimate than winter prickled his spine at the memory of her eyes when she took his cloak upon her shoulders. Some men said those eyes held wildfire. Others saw the deep sea and storm. Jon had glimpsed both. And something gentler besides. Something neither fire nor water could douse. Footsteps approached, light yet certain. He did not need to turn. Her presence carried its own weather. Faint heat washed in salt and smoke. The memory of far-flung coasts. Daenerys stopped beside him, drawing a gray-white cloak around silvery silks that caught the indigo pre-dawn like moonlight snared in snow. The wind snatched a wisp of her hair and set it glowing, a living thread of Valyrian light against the stern backdrop of Winterfell's walls. "It is colder than I imagined," she murmured, voice hushed as though the gods wood beneath might still be listening for broken vows. "The cold keeps us honest," Jon replied, offering half a smile he scarcely felt. He feared honesty more than ice, but there was no turning from it now. They stood a while in comfortable silence, watching the color seep into the world. Far to the east, a narrow blade of rose light clove the horizon, and towers that had been little more than charcoal smudges emerged, sculpted and real. For a moment, Jon thought of the wall at sunrise, the way its frosted crest blazed like a river of fire the first instant the sun touched it. He wondered if Tormund still watched those dawns, if the free folk now gazed on a wilderness finally empty of white walkers. A raven wheeled overhead, croaking once before flapping southward. Daenerys traced its flight with narrowed eyes. "Even the birds carry tidings," she said. "Do you suppose that one brings a blessing or a warning?" "In the north, a raven brings whatever newsmen tie to its leg," Jon answered. "But the old stories say the bird itself chooses whether to fly true. Best we give it reason." She smiled at that, wry, distracted. "I would rather wager on dragons than ravens," she confessed, then shook her head as though chiding herself for the thought. "Word came during the night. Lord Glover is withholding timber until he hears my promise that southern coin will never dictate northern markets. We have been married half a day, and already the realm expects miracles." "Miracles are a poor currency," Jon said. "But plain work yields interest. We ride west tomorrow. He will look us in the eye instead of our signatures on parchment." "Tomorrow," she echoed, gaze drifting toward the distant wolfswood, black-green and inscrutable beneath its quilt of frost. Jon studied her profile in the struggling light, the high arch of her cheekbones, the small scar at her hairline no jeweled circlet could hide, the firmness that lived in the set of her jaw. When she inhaled, cold vapor feathered her lips like smoke from a banked brazier. He wanted to warm her, though he suspected some part of her would always belong to furnace heat he could never match. Not with northern hearths, nor with any vow spoken in the godswood. "Do you regret it?" she asked suddenly. "Not the marriage, but the path it binds you to." "I made my choice beneath those red leaves," he answered, though a string tightened behind his breastbone. "I will stand by it. And if the realm refuses, then we stand by each other." A stillness followed, broken only by the distant clang of iron on iron, as blacksmiths coaxed grudging sparks from morning-cold anvils. Daenerys nodded, as if accepting terms offered by fate itself. She laid her palm, bare, startlingly warm. over John's gloved hand on the stone. The contact steadied him and unsettled him all at once, like the first true test of a sword newly forged. "Come," she said at last. "Winterfell wakes, and we must wake with it." They descended the narrow stair. No one saluted, for no herald had yet announced their presence. But stable boys bowed awkwardly as they hurried past with bedding straw and buckets of grain. Somewhere hounds bayed, smelling the dawn right ahead. Jon led Daenerys along a covered walkway toward the great hall, where Sansa would be waiting with parchment stacks and inkpots, her red hair already knotted for war against numbers and northern pride. The door swung inward on well-oiled hinges, spilling hearthglow over rush-strewn planks. Sansa stood beside a table crowded with sealed scrolls. Across from her, Tyrion Lannister rotated a cup between clever fingers, while Brienne of Tarth loomed like a winter-clad tower, silent but alert. Davos Seaworth leafed through a grain ledger near the fire, muttering softly about river ice and deep-wood harbors. When the royal pair entered, the murmurs hushed. Sansa inclined her head, equal parts queen's courtesy and sister's reserve. "Good morrow." The ravens brought more demands than congratulations. She gestured to the nearest pile. Grain, timber, hostages for peace, tithes lifted in reward for loyalty that barely exists. Tyrion set down his cup with theatrical gentleness. "Nothing quite so sobering as matrimony by mail," he quipped. "Shall we begin dissecting the realm?" And so they did. The morning stretched long, punctuated by the scratch of quills and the crackle of kindling. Daenerys spoke little unless prompted, yet when she did, every syllable cut through the fog of logistics with a smith's precision. Jon listened more than he commanded, interjecting only to translate northern nuance for eyes raised south of Moat Cailin. By midday they had bartered shipping lanes with the Manderless, drafted terms for Glover, and dispatched Ghost with a ranger escort to bear a bark-sealed token of goodwill to the crannogman guarding the neck. After the council dispersed for broth and bread, Jon lingered beside the table where Daenerys leafed through a maester's chart of winter roads. Snow-melt rivulets, penned in faint blue, crawled across the vellum like veins, faint beneath pale skin. "You still mean to ride with me?" he asked, though he knew the answer. "Perhaps the North would like me better if I flew overhead," she mused, fingertip tracing the King's Road. "But justice is earned on the ground." She closed the map. "I spent too long looking down from dragons' backs. Let the lords look up at me from the saddle for once." Evening settled hard and early, thick with flurries that rattled shutters and hissed against torch iron. Jon found himself pacing the yard, searching for peace in the rhythm of soldiers drilling under lanterns. Steel rang, muffled by snow. Brienne oversaw the practice, her own sword glinting with lethal authority. When Arya appeared at Jon's elbow, silent as breath, he did not start. He had grown accustomed to ghosts both living and less so. "You leave tomorrow," she said simply. "Yes, I'm coming." He looked down into eyes still fierce with the storms they had weathered. "I thought you still dreamed of ships and maps uncharted." "I'll sail when I'm certain you won't bleed out on a muddy road," she replied, the corner of her mouth twitching up. "Besides, Nymeria's pack runs near Deepwood this season. They'll track for us." "Bring needle," Jon said, half plea, half order. She touched the hilt at her hip. "Always." That night, beneath a ceiling of dark beams and darker memories, Jon slept fitfully. Dreams dragged him through shifting snows where statues of stark kings whispered warnings too muffled to grasp. When he surfaced into wakefulness, gray light already rimmed the shutters. Daenerys lay beside him, eyes open, face calm, in the hush. She reached for his hand beneath the furs, their fingers entwining like ivy seeking purchase on ancient stone. "No dreams?" he asked. "Only one," she said. "I was walking a path of snow that melted into sand, and every footprint bloomed with dragon lilies. I think it means spring follows us, though we travel in winter." "A kinder omen than most," he murmured, and kissed her knuckles. The departure dawned bright and brutal. Steel-colored sky, diamond dust swirling in vortices behind each pawing hoof. 100 riders bore the entwined banner, direwolf argent and dragon gules upon a field split midnight blue and snow white. At the column's head Jon rode Ghost, the great direwolf loping loose reined at his side. Daenerys followed astride a gray mare, Winter's Grace, loaned from the Stark stables. Her cloak clasp hammered from melted chain links of fallen unsullied. Arya flitted near the scouts. Behind her rode Davos, Tyrion, and a skein of Northmen seasoned in too many wars. Brienne wore the newly forged scale of the Queen's Guard, overlapping plates chased with subtle dragon wings. Sansa watched from the gatehouse, flanked by Samwell and Bran. Snowflakes clung to the dark leaves of Bran's carved chair, but he scarcely blinked. His eyes were turned elsewhere, into Raven's glides and roots, buried deeper than men dared dig. When the portcullis creaked upward and the bells told the royal party gone, Sansa lingered long enough to see their banners shrink against the endless white, as if the world itself tried to swallow hope before spring. The days that followed wove a slow tapestry of cold campfires and cautious diplomacy. At Widow's Watch they eased hunger with casks of salted cod freighted north by brave Osea traders. At Bear Island they knelt before Lyanna Mormont's weather-worn statue and swore to uphold a charter granting fisherfolk voice at the forthcoming Great Council. The sea hammered black rocks with froth, and the islanders' cheers caught in the wind like gull cries. Harsh, free, sincere. Yet for every hearth they warmed, another flickered with suspicion. In the rain-slanted yard of Torrhen Square, a knot of old graybeards demanded proof that dragonfire would never again fall upon northern soil. Daenerys answered with quiet words about rebuilding, about forging swords into plowshares and plowshares into library shelves, her breath fogging in the cold as though each vow took shape before them. Most men looked away, ashamed to meet such naked resolve. One spat in the mud, only to pale when Ghost padded forward, fangs bared in icy silence. Jon raised a hand, and the beast halted one whisker shy of blood. Sometimes justice was restraint. Sometimes that was the harder edge. When they reached Great Bywater, Lord Glover emerged beneath his sigil of the flayed 10. Face cragged like bark left out all winter. His hall bore banners of mourning for sons lost to Ramsay and to the Night King. Jon dismounted first, snow creaking under his boots. He removed his glove and extended a bare hand. Glover stared, gaze flitting to the Dragon Queen behind him, and in that heavy heartbeat the past threatened to fracture the fragile present. Then he clasped Jon's wrist in a soldier's grip and bowed his head. Barely, but enough. Inside, mulled ale steamed in stone cups. They talked until icicles melted from the eaves and froze again. Timber rights for grain relief, harbor taxes eased in exchange for maesters to tutor war orphans. No parchment was signed that night, yet when Jon and Daenerys rode at dawn, 8 wagon loads of seasoned spruce trundled after their column, wheels crunching over rime-stiff mud. Victory sometimes looked like splinters and sawdust. Still, darker rumors tracked them like wolves kept to the tree line. Arya returned from scouting with whispers of Sellswords massing at the Trident, of Dornish envoys courting Reach Lords discontent with winter tariffs, of black-sailed ships flitting between stepstones and stormlands. Each night, Daenerys studied a dog-eared map by firelight, repositioning carved stones. One stone, black and featureless, she placed at the ford of Greenford. Another she set beyond the mountains of the moon. Jon watched the silent game and wondered how many stones the board would require before the playing pieces were men once more. The ambush came 2 mornings later, in a corridor of shoulder-high reeds where mist clung thick as wool. Arrows hissed from shadows. Shields thudded. A horse screamed and went down flailing. Jon's sword cleared leather with chill clarity. The attackers, ragged men in piecemeal mail, krakens crudely daubed on tarnished buckles, rushed screaming, axes raised. But Arya was already among them, needle flashing like frost in moonlight, cutting breaths short before fear found voice. Brienne held the center, plate ringing under blows that glanced harmlessly away. Daenerys drew no blade. Instead, she spurred Winter's Grace to the riverbank and raised a horn to her lips. Though Drogon circled far above, unseen in swirling fog, his answering roar turned water to trembling glass. The reavers faltered, then broke. Afterward, a single prisoner knelt in mud, wrists bound. From his pouch, Arya produced a coin stamped with a crowned squid. Its edges were blackened by salt or blood, it was hard to say. Jon studied the captive's eyes, scared, yes, but something worse lurked there. certainty purchased with coin he still believed lay waiting in safer hands farther south. And so Jon sent a raven to Asha, each word clipped and cold as the iron star on the Greyjoy banner. That night, Daenerys warmed by the fire yet shivered when the wind shifted. Jon placed a wool blanket over her shoulders. She caught his wrist. "They will keep coming," she said, and he felt the truth of it pulse in her grip. "We tread paths worn deep by vengeance. I fear how easily they lead us." "Miwan? Dimon Disa. We walk them together," he answered. "It is when a path is walked alone that it swallows you." She released a breath that might have been a laugh or a sob stifled before birth. Outside the tent, the river kept its own counsel, sliding past sedge and stone, bearing silent witness to everything men tried and failed to own. Weeks slid by. Roads thawed into sucking quagmires, then dried under shy suns. Spring teased the air with damp earth, and the furtive green of buds barely open. In villages once burned by Lannister columns, children now raced the royal banner, shrieking in delight when Ghost bounded among them like snow given mischievous life. Jon saw old men touch the dragonwolf sigil with trembling fingers, disbelief softening into tentative hope. Hope, he realized, was lighter to carry than victory. It asked only for tomorrow. Victory demanded the whole future at once. At River Run, they knelt in the crypt of Hoster Tully, promising Edmure that the Riverlands would host the Great Council. In Harrenhal's vast, scar-walled hall they pledged the fortress to be rebuilt as an academy for healers who would ask allegiance only of knowledge. Stone masons murmured beneath buttresses where dragonfire had left glassy scars. When Daenerys touched a melted column, its surface glittered and fragile rainbows danced across her palm. But unrest roiled unseen. Letters from Sansa reported a faction of southern lords courting Gendry Baratheon as Hammer of the Realm, a tool to forge unity without Targaryen heat. Gendry's own missives swore loyalty, but ink dried faster than ambition. Meanwhile, whispers from Old Town spoke of maesters debating whether new governance might shatter the Citadel's quiet dominion over learning itself. Change bruised every wall it brushed. Exhausted and weary, Jon began to dream waking dreams. Bran's voice through rustling leaves, the wall groaning like a ship's hull as distant thunder cracked its spine. Arya's face dissolving into a mask of a stranger he once called friend. Each vision left him chilled even beneath spring sunlight. He carried the weight in secret, lest Daenerys mistake his silence for doubt in their cause, when it was only doubt in himself. The day they crossed back into the neck, green gold moss spread over every root, and frogs barked lusty challenge from secret pools. At Moat Cailin they raised tents on dry hillocks, and feasted on freshwater crab battle. There Daenerys announced her boldest decree yet. Every great house must send not only lord and lady to the council, but 2 delegates of humble birth, chosen by lot if need be, so the voice of the common folk might rise within those ancient, cracked walls of Harrenhal. Some knights choked on ale, a hedge-born squire wept outright. Jon wondered if he himself, once called Snow, still counted as humble or high. Perhaps both, perhaps neither. Titles felt thin as reed paper beside the marrow-deep knowledge of cold steel and colder duty. That evening he found Daenerys alone on a ridge, watching sunset stain the fens with bruised vermilion. She skipped a stone across a mirror-flat pool. It hopped thrice, trailing ripples that folded the sky into water. "Everything sinks eventually," she said without turning. "Not the stars," Jon ventured. "They fall, given time," she countered. But her smile, reflected in the pool, softened the words. "This land is old, older than dragons, older than thrones. We could pour all our blood into it, and still the moss would outlast us." "Then let the moss remember us kindly," he said. He stepped beside her, and their reflections mingled. The ghost wolf cloak, the silver pale braid, 2 fragile shapes against an infinite heaven changed to water. "Promise me something, Jon," she whispered. "Anything within my power. Promise me that when the council gathers, you will fight for mercy, even when justice clamors loudest." "I promise," he said, though mercy and justice often shared a blade. "And you, temper mercy with truth. even when truth hurts. Her eyes met his, sharp with unshed storms. "I promise." Gulls wheeled overhead, their cries stark in the hush, as if the sky itself sealed their vows. The long road bent north and west until, at last, winter's fortress crowned the horizon once more. Bells rang from Winterfell's towers, banners snapped, and the courtyard thronged with new faces. Craftsmen from Pentos, stewards from Dorne, maesters clutching scroll cylinders fat with charters. Sansa greeted them at the drawbridge. Bran watched with eyes that might yet hold whole histories unwritten. Within sturdy walls now patched smooth and white, Jon felt the old stones thrum beneath his boots, as though the castle recognized his tread, but waited to judge the man he had become. That night, alone again atop the ramparts where their journey had begun, Jon and Daenerys gazed across the moonlit snowfields. The wind carried scents of pine pitch and forge smoke, of life resuming its quiet, stubborn war against cold. Below, lanterns bobbed like fireflies as squires hauled barrels for the coming feast. 5 moons until the council, Daenerys said. Will it be enough? It must be. And if war blows in before peace, then we face it together. She exhaled, visible in the chill. You trust that so easily? No, he admitted. But I choose it. Trust is the seed. Without it, nothing grows. She turned, eyes luminous in starlight, and raised his hand to her lips. If the dragons fail, and the wolves fall, remember this hour. Remember we tried. Jon's pulse echoed in his ears. I will remember. They stood in silence, rulers of a land still broken, still beautiful, breathing the same sharp air. Somewhere distant, a thunderclap rolled over the southern horizon. Perhaps merely weather, perhaps the first drumbeat of storms yet unseen. But for this fragile moment atop ancient walls, ice and fire mingled without quarrel, and hope, dangerous, indomitable, took one more breath in the long winter night. Anika and Ishkau. The hush before dawn lingered over Winterfell like a held breath, faint glimmers quivering at the rim of the sky yet refusing to break. Jon Snow roused to the distant clank of portcullis chains and the earthy smell of damp straw. Stable hands already up, brushing down mounts that would soon bear riders south. Moon-pale embers still glowed in the hearth. He coaxed one alive with a twist of pine, then shrugged into a quilted tunic. Each familiar motion steadied him. Belt, scabbard, the quiet test straw of Longclaw, whose edge flashed blue-white in the dying firelight, before sliding home again with a sigh. Outside, ice whispered along the arrow loops, a midnight lullaby now nearly gone. Daenerys was not in the bed. She had risen earlier still. He found her in the small library Sansa had carved out of grandfather rooms. Narrow walls crowded with newly bound ledgers and the sweet tannin scent of fresh parchment. A brazier guttered near her elbow, sparking gold on the tiny flecks of amethyst in the inkpot. She had discarded her riding gloves. Quill stains darkened her fingernails like bruises. He watched a moment unseen, admiring the way concentration shaped her posture. Back straight, lips a firm line, silver hair coiled in a modest bun so the strands would not stray across her vision. Then he cleared his throat. She did not start, only dipped the quill once more and signed another parchment with a looping D. If we leave these unanswered, she said, blotting the signature, messages will outrun us all the way to Harrenhal. I thought a queen commanded ravens, not the other way round, Jon answered, stepping closer. The parchment piles wrapped them in the soft rustle of turning leaves. How many remain? The distant lords of Frostthorn and Flint's finger the most recent, she replied. Both swear fealty, yet both insist the Great Council will infringe the ancient rites of passage over their hunting trails. She paused, flexing cramped fingers. So I grant them the right to present their claims, but insist they provide bowers and fletchers for the realm's levy in exchange. A kindness strolling hand in hand with duty. Fair, Jon agreed. He touched her shoulder. Warmth radiated through linen. Breakfast waits. A cup of broth only, she said, but rose, cheeks faintly flushed by the brazier. She left the last letter unsealed, ribbon draped across it like a half-finished promise. They broke their fast amid quiet bustle. Servants lugged baskets of seed and root vegetables towards cellar stairs. Maester Wolken, sleeves looped, ladled oats into steaming wooden trenchers, with hurried but deft movements. The yard beyond fogged the windows in breathy swirls. Lanterns hovered like orange ghosts among figures loading wagons. Somewhere Ghost bayed, impatient to run beside riders again. All this before sunrise. Proof that realms were moved, not only by councils, but by calloused hands sensibly rising with the roosters. Tyrion joined them, hair seemingly mussed by the pillow, yet eyes already alight with calculation. A glorious morning for politics disguised as pilgrimage, he observed, spearing a slice of ham. The moment we leave, petitions will multiply like fleas in a blanket freshly warmed. I almost envy Sansa her solitary struggle. Namenter war. Jon shot him a warning glance. The Lady of Winterfell stood a mere table away reviewing quartermaster tallies. But Tyrion only grinned and toasted Sansa with watered wine. She met the gesture with a prim arching of an eyebrow, then returned to her figures. Arya arrived last, boots muddy, cheeks stinging with cold. Scouts report a horse line following the King's Road behind us, she announced, dropping onto the bench beside Brienne. Company unknown, but their campfires burn too high. They want to be seen. Brienne looked to Jon. An escort perhaps, or a message. Jon wiped his mouth. We'll learn soon enough. They left Winterfell at dawn proper. Sunlight spilled over the battlements, washing direwolf towers and dragon banners in a molten bloom that seemed to set the snow ablaze. Sansa saw them off. Bran beside her. Ravens gathered on arching rooftops as though drawn by some silent summons from the Greenseer's chair. When the portcullis clanged, shut behind the last wagon, Jon felt the chill of finality settle. They would not see Winterfell again until justice, whatever shape it chose, was sealed. 3 days south. The company met the riders Arya had sighted, a column of 60 men arrayed in Baratheon black and gold, standard snapping with the crowned stag in mid-charge. At its head rode Gendry, plain helm tucked beneath one arm, features still wearing the honest confusion of a smith drafted into nobility. The two groups regarded one another in the ghosting dust of midday. Jon nudged his destrier forward. Lord Baratheon, he called, voice carrying. Gendry attempted a stiff bow from the saddle, near losing balance. I bring greetings from the Stormlands. He hesitated, eyeing Daenerys, and pledge of peace. Peace is accepted, Jon replied. Ride with us. Later, under a canvas awning whipped by spring gusts, Gendry explained. Storm's End buzzed with envoys urging him toward a crown he had never asked for. Wine from arbor casks loosened tongues. Coin from Casterly vaults paid minstrels to sing Song of the Hammer King. He had refused, but rumor galloped faster than denial, and so he came northward, proof of loyalty forged in his own hand. Daenerys studied him. Ambition you do not want can still crush you, Lord Gendry. Will you speak this truth to the council? Dan. He met her gaze. I'd speak a hammer's truth if words fail, your grace. Anyone craving my crown can test their mettle at the forge. She chuckled softly. Let us hope they prefer parley. The addition of Baratheon riders doubled campfire circles. Through evenings echoing with blacksmith ballads, Jon watched men of Storm's End trade jokes with crag-born wolf's heads, laughter bridging accents once separated by war. If fellowship could spark so easily, he wondered, why did lords obsess over divisions? Then dawn would break, and memory of burnt fields, slain kin, broken oaths would creep back like cold into fingers left bare too long. 10 leagues north of the neck, Davos outriders discovered small cairns of stone marking either side of the road. New stacked, mossless. Davos touched one, frowning. Free folk sign, he murmured to Jon. Tormund maybe, but he rarely crosses this far south. Means watchfulness. That night the watchful eyes showed themselves. A cadre of spear-wielding crannogmen sliding into lantern glow. Water dripping from reeds woven into their cloaks. Their chieftain, slim and dark-eyed, introduced himself as Howland Reed's nephew. He came bearing a reed tube sealed in pitch. Jon unrolled the waterproof paper before the gathered leaders. Bran's spidery script marched across. Storm beneath still waters. 7 faces carved in one. Broken tower cries, drowned crow. Beware sunken steps, and silver masks. Daenerys tapped the sign of the 7 carved faces. Ashai's stories speak of the faceless, and of masks hammered silver to hide devotion to many-faced shadows. Tyrion rubbed his scar thoughtfully. Could be Braavosi kindly men, though they seldom skulk among tides so stagnant as ours. Yet talk in Old Town hints of coin exchanging hands for discreet eliminations. Arya spoke from the rear, voice flat. Not the House of Black and White. They have other tasks. Copycats, maybe. The unknown frightens more easily than the real thing. Gendry leaned over her shoulder. So we fear imposters? We fear zeal, Arya muttered, eyes narrowing. Regardless, scouts doubled. Brienne drilled shield walls until wrists blistered. Masters steeped milkwort against wounds, tipped with unknown poisons. Jon dreamed of broken towers, weeping salt tears into black marshes. At Moat Cailin, they parted from the King's Road, striking southeast along rutted trader paths that skirted Fever River. Spring storms slowed the wagons, mud sucked at wheels, blown clouds rolled like war mammoths across the sky. Yet the column pressed on, drawn by urgency none dared voice. The sense of converging destinies, each mile heavier than the last. On the 10th day, a lone rider galloped from the rear, cloak lashing. Jon, riding point with Daenerys, turned at the thunder of hooves. The messenger half slid from his saddle, breath pluming. Ravens from Winterfell, Lord Urgent. He produced 2 tins, one bearing Sansa's sigil, the other plain. Jon cracked Sansa's first. Ink blurred slightly by a haste said, "Gold cloaks massing in King's Landing." Rumor of Lannister vaults reopened. Citadel delegates arrived here questioning legitimacy of council. Strongly advise acceleration. Daenerys took the second tube. The seal impressed no sigil, but rather a braided knot of reeds. Within, a single slip read, "The drowned crow seeks wing amidst burning towers. Green fires whisper your names. Meet me in the House of Echoes 3 nights before full moon. Bring true steel. Carl." Tyrion, peering, exhaled a low oath. Green fires? Does he mean wildfire reservoirs under King's Landing? Carl? Jon asked. Asha's man, Daenerys answered. Faithful, if half-crazed. She handed the note to Arya, whose expression did not change, but whose fingers lingered a heartbeat on the words. Decision snapped like frozen twig underfoot. They would press hard to Queen's Crown Holdfast, a watering post 2 days south, then break the column, most continuing toward Harrenhal, while a smaller lighter party swung east to the aptly named House of Echoes, an abandoned hall at the fringes of the Blackwater Rush. Jon argued to accompany her. She insisted his presence vital at the council. Compromise settled on them both going, but cloaked, few guards, ghosting through back roads with Arya leading. Brienne bristled until Daenerys placed a gauntleted hand on hers. Sir Brienne, your oath is to protect me, yes, but also the realm. Keep the larger company safe. Make Harrenhal ready. I trust you precisely because I can leave you. Brienne bowed, jaw taut. Then you will return to claim that trust. The detachment left under a slivered moon. Jon, Daenerys, Arya, Davos, and 6 riders, chosen for stealth, not renown. Ghost padded ahead, near invisible among birches. They rode without banners, armor muffled beneath hunters' leathers. By day they hid among ruins or fisher shacks. By night they followed star courses, Arya plotted with wordless confidence. On the second, dusk-pale columns emerged from trees. The House of Echoes, once seaside manse, its seaward wall collapsed so surf sighed through empty archways. Waves flung salt over barnacled stone. Gulls cried overhead. Inside, water pooled on shattered tiles. Moss-veiled broken mirrors still clinging to walls, so reflections wavered like trapped spirits. Near the wreck of a salt-eaten fountain, a hooded shape waited. Carl wore sealskin over chainmail, hair bleached by brine. "My queens, my king," he greeted, bowing awkwardly. His eyes glinted. "We sail rough seas. He spoke quickly. Euron Greyjoy's remnants had struck bargain with Mirish cell sales and exiled alchemists, disgraced after Cersei's wildfire cataclysm. They dredged old caches beneath Blackwater's banks, coaxing wildfire still potent if coaxed with silver salts. The concoctions, he claimed, would be deployed not on cities but at Harrenhal itself, detonated under banners of Baratheon false loyalists to frame Gendry, fracture realm and scatter fealty back to warring corners. It cannot be smuggled past river gates unseen, Davos argued. It arrives already inside, Carl countered. He produced a muddy clay jar sealed with lead. Symbols scorched its side. Alchemist's runes. Pulled from cistern beneath Harrenhal's Hall of 100 Hearths last moon. More lie below. Daenerys' face hardened. Who planted them? Old rats, Carl said, shrugging. But one queen's rat recently. He drew a knife, tapped the lead top. Gold cloaks deliver pig iron by night, claiming it feed for smithies. He spat. Feed for green fire. Silence settled heavy. Waves shushed like conspirators through the broken wall. Jon looked to Arya. How far to Harrenhal at full gallop? 2 days if roads hold, she answered. Her knuckles whitened on Needle's hilt. We ride at first light, Daenerys declared, eyes blazing hotter than any wildfire. And we fly. She meant Drogon. That night, they lit no campfire, but slept in turns beneath wailing rafters. Jon dreamed of molten green rivers twisting through dark halls, walls bulging outward like bellies of dead giants. They rose before dawn. Arya and Davos led riders by land. Jon and Daenerys struck for a forest clearing where Drogon waited, summoned through wordless bond. The great black dragon crouched like a mountain made of night, scales reflecting nascent glow of sunrise. Jon helped Daenerys into the saddle forged of blackened iron. Then, heart hammering, he mounted behind her, arms encircling her waist. Drogon's wings unfurled with thunderous whoops. Wind blasted the reeds flat. They took the sky. Cold tore tears from Jon's eyes. Below, the river writhed silver. Clouds streaked them in vapor. Sun climbed, gilding everything. They flew southeast, racing daylight. Hours blurred in roaring gale. Harrenhal's charred towers speared sky by mid-afternoon, vast ruins sprawling like a wolf's carcass half-picked. From altitude, Jon saw tents studded along the outer ward. 1,000, maybe more. Sigils fluttering. Manderly merman, Tarly huntsman, Dorne's son and spear. Smoke from cookfires spiraled lazily. It looked peaceful, almost festive. Daenerys guided Drogon low, circling out of arrow range. She pointed to the north keep. Tiny figures hauling barrels through a postern. No sigil on the casks. Jon felt ice grip his belly. Arya must reach us soon. But Arya was already within. Earlier that day, Arya's party skirted the main gate, slipping past stables where banners obscured sentries' view-eyed. Ghost caused a diversion. A howling charge through pig pens scattered swine and men alike, clearing path to a culvert leading beneath the kitchens. Arya wriggled first, Davos after. They emerged among greased pots and startled scullions. Sweat and tallow thickened the air. Arya donned apron and headscarf. In minutes she glided unremarked through steam-clouded corridors, following the map Bran had pressed into her hand weeks before. Lines inked in elder branch charcoal. Down spiral stairs slick with moss, past crypt where old herons screeched in wind, to tunnels rumored collapsed. Collapsed they were not. A new timber brace propped a tunnel mouth. Fresh boot tracks imprinted damp clay. Arya padded forward, feet silent. Voices echoed. Foreign accents, laughter edged with nerves, clinks of glass. She peered around a corner. 3 men knelt beside open crate, lifting ceramic spheres daubed with green. One joked about dragons, another shushed him. Arya slid forward like night incarnate. Needle flashed. 2 fell before fear reached their eyes. The third spun, raising a ball. She sprang, plunging the point into his throat even as he flung the sphere. It clattered but did not break, rolling to rest against a wall. Arya swallowed hard. Davos arrived, torch high, jaw locked. Together they surveyed shelves stacked with more jars than Arya could count. How many would bring the castle down? She whispered. Half. Davos guessed grimly. More burn the whole goddamned lake. Footsteps drummed above. Arya cursed quietly. They needed fire breaks, wet sand, barrels of river water. None close, but they could at least prevent hidden detonation. She smashed first jar against stone. Thick fluid hissed, but absent reagent, only smoked. She smashed another, then another, Davos following. If the enemy wanted precise charges, they would find spoiled venom instead. Yet the tunnel forked deeper than they'd guessed. From the dark came chanting in low guttural. Torchlight revealed half masks of polished silver upon cloaked faces. A ring of them 8, 10? Arya pushed Davos behind her. One mask twisted into mocking grin. Many-faced judge welcomes you, the voice sang. Female or male, hard to tell. One death opens many doors. Arya's blood thrummed. Then let's see whose door closes first, she said, darting forward, needle lancing for a gap at the neck. Battle in tunnel. Flames, glass, bodies, echoes. Above, Drogon landed in the outer ward, beating tents flat. Screams erupted. Soldiers scrambled. Jon leapt down, drawing Longclaw. Find the master of tunnels, he shouted. Seize every alchemist. Daenerys strode to the keep door, ablaze with purpose. Steel rang as knights formed hasty cordon. She ignored raised points, voice booming. Stand aside or burn for treason. Most obeyed. Some too slow lost banners to Drogon's snapping jaws. Inside the keep, Jon found a gaunt man in green-stained robes bound by harried guards. Sir Bennis of Brightwater, once bannerman to House Florent, now confessed broker of wildfire for coin promised by the lady with many faces. Interrogation swift. Shipments disguised as lamp oil, stored in lower vaults, set to ignite during King's Moot on Midsummer Night. Daenerys' gaze froze him harder than iron. How many accomplices? Bennis whimpered names. Some Jon recognized. Minor knights from Crownlands, Sellswords once loyal to Golden Company. Others, unknown. He ordered immediate arrests. Davos would later humor grimly that ravens flew thicker than summer flies that evening. But Arya was missing. Jon plunged into stairs, descending humid depths. Daenerys close. Torchlight flickered over ceiling scars melted long ago by dragonfire, older than any living memory. At last, rough cries guided them. Davos, bloodied, kneeling over motionless body of masked foe, while Arya leaned against wall, panting, clothes spattered green and red. She's cut, Davos said, binding rag around Arya's arm, green liquid smoking where it dripped. Not wildfire, alchemist's acid component, burned deep. Arya waved him off. Cuts worsen Bravos, she insisted but winced. Daenerys knelt, tore linen from her sleeve, and pressed cooling paste from a maester's jar she always carried. Steam rose, Arya clenched teeth. Thank you, she breathed. Jon surveyed, shattered jars, stench of scorched chemicals. How much left intact? Too damned much, Davos muttered. We broke what we could. Others may hide elsewhere. We flush every tunnel, Jon vowed. Sand from the lake, cold water, stone blocks. No ceremony until each cellar rung hollow. For 4 days, Harrenhal became a hive. Masons walling tunnels, maesters testing soil for green scent of volatile oils, soldiers unrolling chains of wet canvas. Lords grumbled. Councils delayed. Small folk watched dragon wings sweep low over towers as if ancient curse returned. Rumor of sabotage spread like fire itself, yet something steadier spread too. Admiration for rulers willing to wrestle terror, rather than cloak it behind smiling proclamations. Gendry arrived with main host, despair on his face upon seeing barrels displayed in courtyard as evidence. Jon clapped his shoulder. They failed, he reminded the Smith Lord. Your name remains yours. Brienne's garrison secured gates. Tyrion orchestrated logistic miracle, replacing lamp oil across the castle with fresh supply, each cask personally stamped. dwarfish helmet caricature as guarantee, half joke, half oath. As repairs neared completion, Daenerys convened pre-council moot of delegates already arrived. Northern chieftains, Dornish sand-stepped envoys, even 2 wary Iron Bank factors. They gathered in the hall of the 100 hearths, beneath blackened ribs of roof, still holding chill from Aegon's first conquest. Jon spoke first. Of sabotage uncovered and unity required. He kept words plain, but voice carried iron. When he finished, Daenerys stepped forward. She held up a single intact wildfire jar, now cracked and emptied. "This is fear," she proclaimed. "Liquid promise of destruction, sold cheap to those who would rule ashes. If any here think to sway this gathering with similar dread, remember, we have seen fear, and we broke it." She hurled the jar to the flagstones. It shattered, harmless shards. The echo rippled through the hall, a boom as loud as any dragon roar. In the hush that followed, something shifted, an undertow of resolve gathering among disparate faces. Jon caught Tyrion's slight nod of approval, Sansa's satisfied curve of lips, Gendry's grin. Even Maester Marwyn, skeptical archipelago of wrinkles, allowed a thoughtful hum. Yet one key had not yet turned. The Maester's delegation, led by Archmaester Valen, they questioned legitimacy of random smallfolk delegates. Over evening wine, Tyrion suggested approach less adversarial. Daenerys considered, then proposed demonstration. Bring the chainmakers from Bear Island, the Crannog weavers, the Stormlander blacksmith apprentices. Have them present innovations and grievances side by side. Knowledge paired with lived experience might sway even parchment-mired scholars. The exposition filled Harrenhal's outer yard. A Manderley shipwright displayed scale model of river barges employing pivot keels. A Dornish potter unveiled fire-hardened grain storage jars shaped for stacking. A girl no older than 15 from the gift revealed wick lantern using rendered cod oil brighter and safer than tallow. Archmaester Velen's quill flew across his ledger. By dusk he requested audience with Daenerys. Privately he conceded, "The realm shifts beneath our feet. Stones remember. But we would be wise to print new texts upon clay still wet. The citadel will not impede this council. Natural. Progress, fragile as ice in morning sun, but progress." As Midsummer's Eve neared, Jon noticed Daenerys leaving bed earlier each night, wandering ramparts alone. He followed once, finding her staring at black water of God's eye, reflecting torn moon. "Dreams?" he asked. "Memories," she answered. "Of Meereen's pyramids, of Astapor's Red Run, of bells in King's Landing. Victories cost lives. I fear tomorrow's triumph tally will outnumber our purses again." He wrapped cloak around her. "We'll pay in different coin this time." She leaned into him. "Promise? As you once asked, I'll fight for mercy when justice clamors loudest." He kissed her brow. "And you will temper mercy with truth." Her breath eased. "Then let us greet dawn." The great council convened on the final day of the full moon week. Delegates filled raised tiers. Lords, ladies, 2 chosen commons per domain. Maesters, envoys of free cities. Banner poles forested the hall. Direwolves beside dragons, roses beside sun spears, stag next to kraken, old enemies shoulder to shoulder beneath vaulted gloom. Bran the Broken presided on wheeled throne at dais center, his stillness commanding as carved heart tree. Sansa stood at his right, Tyrion left, scroll in hand. Daenerys and Jon entered last. No crowns, only simple cloaks bearing wolf and dragon halves stitched together. Murmurs rippled like wind across wheat. Sansa spoke. "By right of winter and summer, by will of surviving houses and voices of the free, we open this council. Let matters be set plain." Nebrasa. For 7 days they debated. Land rights, trade tithes, succession guidelines, the living wage of small folk levy, the abolition of forced oaths by child wards. Jon listened, spoke little except to clarify witness accounts, bridging harsh north vowels and soft reach cadences. Daenerys argued fiercely that every lady and lord must sign rotational charter limiting levies to seasons. preventing perpetual war economy. Gendry proposed new guild charters, guaranteeing coin for innovations born of smiths and shipwrights, beyond noble patronage. Even reserved Archmaester Valen suggested establishing branch libraries at host castles, open to common study. Tempers flared. Lord Tarley accused Dornish corsairs of piracy. Dornish envoy retorted with list of reach taxes choking desert trade. Arya, seldom present, diffused tension once by demonstrating swift disarm of two arguing men before they realized her intent. Laughter softened edges. On the sixth night, a storm thundered. Green lightning flickered. Jon tensed until he recognized natural hue. Still, he walked battlements, memories of sabotage ghosting. Ghost trotted at his heel. In distance, he glimpsed flicker within woods, but dismissed as foxfire. The final morning dawned still and bright. Votes tallied by pebble drop echoed like raindrops into bronze bowls. Amendments passed, some failed. At last came question of throne itself. Who would reign, and how chosen henceforth? Silence heavier than any debate descended. Eyes swung between the wolf-dragon couple. Tyrion cleared throat. We have lived under birthright and burn right. We stand now with choice. Let us choose not a monarch alone, but a council in perpetuity. 7 seats, each rotated a decade. 3 reserved for those of small folk rise. 4 for houses, selections confirmed by realm's vote. Nahan. Gasps. Dot. House lords muttered. Yet commons roared approval, drowned all else. Jon rose, feeling weight of centuries on shoulders. I came from bastardy to command, fought living and dead. Took no throne, though armies hailed me king. I will not wear one now, but I will serve, if chosen, for spans set by law, alongside any willing to carry burden together. Daenerys stood, voice ringing. I shed blood to break chains. Let no crown forge them anew. I too will serve, for I am no less bound by oaths than each of you. Archmaester Valen struck staff 3 times. Then, let it be tested. They voted, not by pebbles, but by show of hands. Lords, ladies, commons, maesters, free city observers acknowledging outcome. Majority, vast. Council of 7 established. First-term seats filled. Jon, Daenerys, Sansa, Gendry, Prince Corin Martell, Archmaester Valen, and a fisherwoman named Lenya Waters, drawn by lot from among smallfolk delegates. Her face astonished, tear-streaked. Cheers shook charred rafters. Somewhere a raven cried. Bran's expression remained inscrutable. Yet Jon thought he sensed faint warmth in the cold seer's eyes, as though fate's web twanged in satisfied chord. That night feast fires glared against ruined walls now hung with fresh tapestries. Minstrels played songs old and newly penned. Dragons soared overhead in duskglow. Rahaigal and Viserion's offspring hatched under Daenerys' care, now near-grown, joining Drogon in sky ballet. Children pointed, squealed. Fear became wonder. Arya slipped beside Jon near edge of revel. Leaving, she said simply. He nodded. West of west. She smiled. Beyond maps. Right when quills catch you. She clasped his forearm, grip fierce. Then ghosted away. A shadow embraced by lantern light one final time. Gendry approached with mugs. To stubborn snow and stubborn dragon, he toasted. To equal measure hammer. Jon returned clinking. Daenerys danced with row of fisherfolk, silver hair whipping. Laughter bubbled like spring brook freed of ice. When she finally returned, cheeks flushed, she pressed into Jon's side beneath constellations older than first men. Justice, she asked softly. Still work to do, he admitted, resting forehead to hers. But tonight, she insisted. He kissed her, gentle at first, then deeper as crowd noise melted into heartbeat and hearth crackle. Above them, towers of Harrenhal, scarred witness to tyranny and trial alike, stood silent but, for the first time in living memory, unafraid of flame. Dawn painted the god's eye lake mirror pink. Jon and Daenerys walked hand in hand along water's fringe. Bitterns flapped, reeds rustled. Small ripples chased minnows near shore where old cinders had cooled. She skipped a pebble. It hopped once, twice, vanished. 5 hours, she mused, smiling sideways. Our story lingers longer than any stone's flight. John squeezed her hand. And longer yet to tell. They gazed across still water where sky blended with earth so seamlessly, one could scarcely see boundary. For all they'd broken, chains, schemes, wildfire jars, they had built something rarer. A future neither frost nor flame could claim alone. Together, they breathed in quiet. Somewhere far, bells tolled the first meeting of the council. Duty beckoned, yet for this sliver of morning, king and queen, wolf and dragon, stood simply as two souls who had chosen hope over fear. In that choice, they found the realm already ruled by justice, if only just begun. They turned, hand in hand, toward the rising sun. A slow hush settled over Harrenhal when the first hourglass ran out and the council delegates dispersed to their allotted quarters. The grand torches sputtered against stone blackened by history's tireless blaze, and the courtyard, moments before alive with song and stomping heels, felt as if the castle itself were breathing in, savoring the pause before duty roused its halls again. Moon-washed banners drooped in the windless night, their silks limp. The thread of wolf and dragon, almost invisible without firelight to catch its weave. Jon Snow lingered beneath the arch of the north gate, letting the hush seep deep. Somewhere inside the keep, gentry's laughter, rich and booming, rose collided with the vaulted ceilings and drifted into broken corridors. Elsewhere, Tyrion's quick voice punctuated quiet with clatter of dice and mug. But Jon could not rest. Heavy parchment rolls rested beneath his arm, fresh wax still warm from the maester's seal. Proposed boundaries for river tolls, new guild charters with quorum amendments, scratched long after bells had ceased. He pivoted toward the outer bailey, Ghost pacing ahead with ears cocked, tail low. The air tasted of iron and damp reeds, thick with frog song from the lake. A torch guttered, curving smoke like a beckoning finger. Footsteps whispered behind. Daenerys, boots muffled by riding swayed, silver hair unbound so it fell soft along her cloak. She had dismissed her guards, though Jon sensed unsheathed sharpness in the calm of her stride. "Couldn't sleep?" she asked. Her voice, though quiet, carried the warmth of blade fresh from forge. "Not with parchment pleating under my arm," he replied. He turned the scroll so she could glimpse neat rows of signatures, noble and common and somewhere between. "I wanted to hear the stone breathe." Daenerys stepped beside him. In the torch's falter, her eyes held the gold flecks of candle-lit amber. "Stone breathing," she repeated, thoughtful. "Does it speak?" "It listens," Jon said. "Harren's fires cracked these walls, Aemon's blood blackened them, and now our words climb them like ivy. They'll hold the memory. If we falter, the stone will remind those after us what silence feels like." She placed a hand over his, on the scroll. "Then let us carve the right memory." She tipped her head toward the lake shore. "Come." "I left something in the reeds." He followed. Ghost trotted ahead, nose testing silt. At the waterline a skiff bobbed, its rope hitched to a half-sunken piling. Daenerys stepped in lightly and offered Jon her hand. They pushed off. The hush swallowed them. The lake's mirror lapped the hull, reflecting ragged tatters of cloud and one blinking star. Midway to the island, the reeds parted. Shapes emerged. Low silhouettes, long necks. Two dragons half-grown, Razor and Kalian, scales pewter and jade where moonlight struck. They lay coiled amid cattails taller than a man, wings furled, eyes slitted in lazy watch. A third shape rose behind them, mountainous, Drogon. His nostrils flared as if testing whether the skiff carried friend or prey. Then he lowered his head until his muzzle skimmed the water. Ripples fanned round like glass shattered slow. Daenerys set an oar across the bow and stood. "They guard a gift," she said. "For Westeros." Jon's brow furrowed. He scanned the reed bed until his gaze snagged on something pale. An egg, but not the charcoal-veined ovals he had seen in dragon cradles. This shell glimmered pearl white, laced with silver streaks. Smaller too, perhaps no heavier than a goose's offering. She knelt in the skiff, reaching both hands to the shallows. The dragons remained still, their watch solemn, as Daenerys lifted the egg. Water sheeted off its curved surface in milky beads. "Laid 6 nights ago," she said. Drogon guarded it, but when I placed my hand upon the shell it cooled rather than warmed. I think this one is different. Jon touched the shell. A faint, steady pulse throbbed under his palm. Not heat, but a rhythmic vibration like a distant drum. Alive? Yes, yet it resists flame. She cupped it, as though holding dawn. As though ice and fire mingle inside. Jon's breath caught. A dragon for a world no longer at war with winter. Perhaps. She set the egg upon a folded cloak in the skiff's prow. "We will give it to the council. It's hatching to be overseen by all 7 seats. A promise we do not hoard power." Jon regarded her in the lamplight. "You would surrender the first new egg since your return?" She met his gaze. "What I keep secret breeds suspicion. What I share freely may plant trust." He nodded, understanding both sacrifice and stratagem entwined. They rowed back, silent, save the gentle plash. Ghosts shape-paced the berm, white blur under stars. When they dragged the skiff ashore, Jon lifted the cloaked egg. It weighed less than he imagined, yet gravity of it dragged at his shoulders. As they walked, Daenerys touched his arm. "There is something else," she said. "Tomorrow, I ride for Maidenpool." Jon stopped. "Alone?" "With 2 outriders, nothing more." Her tone brooked no objection, but she softened it. "A sickness sweeps the port. Fishermen said green lesions bloom on skin, like burning moss. The maesters fear wildfire residue from sunken casks. If it is the alchemist's doing, we must see it with our eyes." Jon exhaled. "Take me instead of guards. You must hold the council while I'm gone." She glanced toward Harrenhal's looming mass. "And it gives us chance to prove the body can act when the head leaves." He recognized necessity. As Stark, he hated it. "Return before the Charter's final ratification." "I will." She shrugged inside her cloak. "And if I fail, you have my vote." Ice and fire joined. "Speak of failure again, and I'll tie you to Drogon's saddle." He tried to smile, but dread flickered. Days since sabotage, yet threats bred in the dark. They parted at Shale Steps. Jon watched her ascend torchlit stairs, the egg cradled like fading moonlight, until stone swallowed silver hair. Dawn cracked with gull cries. Jon gathered council members in the ruined solar. Morning sun pouring through arrow slits, newly glazed. At the table, Gendry nursed tea, laced with mint, eyes puffy from too many toasts. Vaelin sharpened a quill, as though planning to duel with ink. Sansa slipped in last, Bran's chair following. The boy kings gazed distant. Jon placed the cloaked bundle on oak boards. "The Queen has gone to Maidenpool to investigate plague rumors," he announced. Murmurs collided. Before she left, she offered this. He pulled back cloth. Pearl-white shell shimmered, veins of silver like lightning trapped in porcelain. Gasps rippled. Vaelin's hand twitched, the inkpot rattled. Sansa raised a brow. "Another egg." "Not merely another," Jon said. "She gifts it to the council, to keep under communal care. Its eventual rider, if it hatches, will be chosen not by blood but by the realm's need." Gendry whistled low. "Smith's oath, that's bold." "It is precedent," Vaelin murmured. "A living symbol that power, once hoarded, poisons." He drafted quick lines across parchment. "I propose we secure it in the God's Eye septum. 5 wardens with rotating watch." "Agreed," Jon said. "But we must craft ritual beyond locks. Something the people witness." "We stage a procession," Tyrion suggested from end of table. Eyes alight, though his head throbbed. "Walk it through the camp, open case. Let small folk see their stake." Jon nodded. 8 dusk, when fires glow. Bran's voice drifted, thin as distant wind. "The shell hums in the river of green." The room stilled. They waited, but he offered no further cryptic clue. While word of dragon gift raised campfires, Daenerys and 2 outriders, Sir Michael Mertens and Lara Sand, rode hard down the wide river road. Fog clung knee-high. Dew-jeweled spiderwebs strung between reeds. They passed flax fields shimmering pale blue, then huts abandoned, charcoal smudges on timber where hearths once smoked. 2 leagues from Maidenpool's gates they met the smell, salt overlaid with sour rot and something sharper. The acrid sting of spent alchemist powders. Watchmen hailed them with ragged voices from atop wooden palisades hastily raised. Through slats Daenerys glimpsed streets flooded by tide and sickness both, barrels of fish gutted and left to swell, dogs slinking, eyes alight with hunger. The bailiff, a woman named Matrice, explained as she led them. Started with dockhands, she said. Blisters green and black, hair falling, fever so hot skins burst. We quarantined docks, but wind blew ash inland. We think plague spreads on dust. Daenerys pulled scarf over nose. Show me the origin. They descended rickety wharf ladders. Most ships had weighed anchor and fled. Those that remained drifted at moorings, decks empty. Near harbor mouth, a hulk lay charred to waterline. On shore, lumps of glassy slag glimmered. Wildfire residue cooled to brittle jade. Matrice said 4 sailors had pried open half-molten crates for salvage. 2 died within hours. The others raved in tongues, then drowned themselves. A drifting current carried ash, coating nets, sun-baked bait. Daenerys knelt by one slag chunk, gloved fingers tracing ripples. Memories flashed. King's Landing's great pyre, ash falling like snow. She swallowed. Gather healing herbs, dock leaf, borage, and charcoal. Boil water with both. Have sick breathe steam. We've tried. Matrice's voice trembled. It eases nothing. Sir Michael crouched. If the cause is wildfire salts, we must bury spillage deep, seal it under clay. Daenerys rose, gaze sweeping harbor. Prepare pits outside wind's reach. We burn driftwood tonight, push ash into trenches, then flood with seawater. Lime afterward. Work began at once. Fisher crews, eager to prove worth to Queen's Road, scoured beach for shards. Lara Sand oversaw boiling of vinegar vats. Fumes stung eyes yet carried faint relief where it touched lesions. Throughout, Daenerys moved among sickbeds, pressing cool cloths, whispering in Valyrian lullaby. Some stirred, others lay still as stone. She made note of ratio. Those touched by liquid frothed faster than those who inhaled powder only. They must find and sink crate still afloat. Night bled across the sea. Torches roared while townsfolk heaved slag into trenches. At moon's rise, a hush-swept crowd. 3 ships appeared, sails furled black, hulls hugging low tide. Their prows bore krakens scrawled in quick tar. Ironborn, Lara cursed. Reavers sniff plague like gulls to carrion. Daenerys signaled archers, but she knew bows would do little if those ships carried catapults with wildfire still intact. She tasted dread and fury in equal measure, sabotage upon sabotage. If the attackers had crates aboard, they meant to scatter plague, not salvage. She strode to Quay's edge, wind whipping cloak. Drogon was leagues away. She had come light. But fire lived in more than flame. She lifted both hands and cried words attuned to dragons, summoning not beast but resolve. Behind her, archers knocked. Yet before first arrow loosed, a horn bellowed from the north road. Hoofbeats thundered. 100 riders bearing stag and wolf banners together. Gendry led, armor still dented from Smith's anvil. Arya rode beside him astride a sleek courser, eyes flashing in torchshine. Shouts erupted as they charged dockside, forming wedge between townsfolk and sea. Ironborn, seeing sudden line of steel, veered. One ship's prow scraped shoal, stuck fast. Gendry hurled a hammer into its hull. Wood splintered. Arrows rained. Torchbite leapt to tar seams. Flames danced blue-green, wildfire mixing in pitch. Daenerys seized a pail of seawater and doused embers, preventing chain reaction. Ironborn flung grapnels, but riders sliced ropes. Seeing wind turn, the remaining vessels pulled oars, retreating into mist. When silence fell, Daenerys clasped Gendry's forearm. "How?" "Jon read your lack of raven as too silent." Gendry panted. "We rode fast." He cast gaze over smoldering wreck. "Seems just in time." Arya dismounted without word, trudged to shattered crate. She fished out a medallion, silver disc etched with a many-faced mask. "Same brand as Harrenhal." She pocketed it. "They want us chasing phantom feet." Daenerys met her stare. "Masks scatter, one sponsor remains." "Keyburn's Spectre," Arya guessed. "Or another alchemist in shadow." They would hunt truth later. Tonight there were trenches to seal, wounds to salve, fear to tame. Gendry organized smiths to heat iron rods, cauterizing pustules slowed spread. Daenerys ordered vinegar mist pumped through town square. By dawn, fevered moans subsided to hoarse breaths. A dozen still died, but dozens more held to life. Back in Harrenhal, Jon presided over the eggs procession. Red silk standard snapped. Townsfolk pressed close to glimpse pearl shell born in crystal cradle. Instead of pomp, music came from flutes carved by river folk, a humble tune. Children scattered petals. The egg glimmered, heartbeat ever so faint, so steady he felt his own match pace. At the septum, 7 guardians sworn from different houses formed circle. An Umber, a Tyrell cousin, a Martell, a Manderley, a Lady Smallwood archer, a Baratheon pageboy, and Linya Waters herself, who had insisted small folk guard what belonged to all. Keys forged from melted battlefield arrowheads locked the crystal dome. Each guardian held one. Cheers cascaded. Jon looked over heads, seeing hope ignite like sunrise cresting blade. He knew darker clouds gathered beyond horizon, yet for this moment, the realm inhaled without coughing war smoke. That night, as fires wound down, Tyrion tapped Jon's shoulder. "I sent ravens to Old Town," he said. Baelin's notes on plague, wildfire salt interactions. Citadel might learn how to neutralize should villainy repeat. Jon clasped his forearm. "Good." And a raven from White Harbor arrived. Tyrion's smile thinned. Ships sighted flying the triple spiral of Bravest. Bank envoys perhaps sell sails. Baiting him away. Jon's thoughts turned to coin-fueling sabotage. "We will meet them at Rivermouth and demand ledgers." He retired late, but sleep fled. He climbed to broken rampart. Ghost lay there, nose pointed east. A wisp of dream clung. Shadows wearing silver masks knelt round a pit where pale roots writhed. A girl with violet eyes stepped forward, her shadow dragon-shaped. Then wind erased vision. Behind him, soft tread. Sansa Tor. She wrapped shawl tighter. "News from the Vale," she said. Robar Royce suppressed a mountain clan's revolt sparked by stories that the council will drown tradition. She sighed. "Our work drips through cracks faster than we seal them." Jon leaned on stone. "We expected cracks. Some run deeper." She offered parchment. Sketch of sigil. Eclipse half sun, half crow. Spotted on mercenary shields near the trident. No record of such house, likely facade. Another mask. Jon crushed paper. "They multiply like flies on corpse." Sansa studied him. "You look tired, brother." "So does the realm." He managed a grin. She touched his elbow. "You still have us." For 5 days, Maidenpool healed. Daenerys oversaw burial of contaminated soil under lime. A rainstorm blessed efforts, tamping dust. Gendry crafted bronze badges for healers who risk lesions. Arya slipped north to track Ironborn return route. Her raven arrived bearing news. The ships hailed from Duskin Point. A cove rumored empty since Euron's death. More crates waited there. She requested ships, silence, and one wildfire-immune escort. Drogon. Daenerys penned assent, but first flew Drogon over Maidenpool, banking low to let townsfolk see might now allied to mercy. Children shrieked delight. Fishermen tipped hats. She left Lara and Michael to finish, when a rider from Harrenhal reached her. The scroll bore Bran's hand, crow wing over pearl. Beware the stone that sings the wrong song. She frowned and set course home. When she alit it in Harrenhal's yard the next dusk, Jon met her beneath the stair arch, relief breaking his composure for a heartbeat. They clasped hands, foreheads touching. "The town?" he asked. "Lives," she said. "Wounds and warnings both." He escorted her to Septum. Guardian's open dome. The egg shone brighter, silver veins pulsing quicker, as though maiden voyage in common hands stirred its heart. But Jon noted faint spiderweb crack on one side. He ran thumb over it. The shell was cold, yet vibration thrummed stronger. Velen approached with magnifying lens. "Splinter but no breach," he declared. "Pressure building inside perhaps." "That shell changed after procession," Linya Waters said from door. "I feel it hum when I pass." Daenerys exchanged glance with Jon. "Dragon chooses birth hour," she murmured. "We must prepare." Meanwhile, bar south, Arya and a hand-picked force slipped into Dustin Point's drowned tunnels. She moved like moonshadow, needle-thirsty for answers. They found crates, dozens, stacked near natural chimney-venting sea breeze. Half empty. Tracks of barrels rolled to hidden cove where shallow draft skiffs awaited. A long stone wall shone same eclipse crow sigil. Arya trailed prints to a cavern mouth. Voices echoed. High Valyrian laced with accent. Valentine. She glimpsed council of cloaked figures round brazier. At center hunched a bent alchemist, stirring stew of wildfire salts and ground obsidian dust. They spoke of Swan's arrival, coin delivered, and mask of many faces replaced by mirror of none. Before she could retreat, a pebble betrayed her. Silence snapped. Daggers flew. Arya dodged, cut down first attacker. Yet cave erupted in chaos. Someone hurled lantern, green tongues roared. She rolled, flames licking cloak. With luck and speed, she reached shoreline, signaled skiffs. Her men fired quarrels, covering retreat while wildfire lit the cave like new sun. Explosions rocked cliff. Stone cracked. Sea hissed as molten green poured. One cloaked leader escaped, springing to Black Horse. Arya pursued along ridgetop, but the figure wheeled and cast something. A sphere of glass that shattered, releasing silver vapor. Horse and rider vanished in billow. When wind cleared, hoofprints ended as if swallowed. She cursed, carved arrow sign on bark for ravens, and led men to burn remaining crates. At dawn, only sizzling ash remained, and tide bore emerald sheen far out. Fading, she sailed for Harrenhal with shards of the rider's glass, veined with carnelian, etched inside with spiral rune, evidence of a craft beyond alchemists. Back north, preparations for charter signing reached fever pitch. Delegates rehearsed oaths, cooks roasted whole boars. Tyrion organized spectacle. The egg to rest on dais, while each house steward approached to place pinch of their homeland's soil in basin below, symbol that dragon-born of all earths. Evening before ceremony, Bran summoned Jon privately. In candle-lit rookery, Bran's face shadowed, iris-wide pools. "The stone sings a wrong song," he said. Dreamt of cracks widening, melody discordant. A hand of glass seeks to pluck last string. Jon's pulse quickened. "Do you speak of the egg, or of hearts?" Bran shivered, though no breeze found the tower. "Guard the pearl, but guard Daenerys more." Jon left unsettled. He doubled the Queen's watch, hand-picked veterans Ned once trusted. He told no one else. Ceremony dawned cloudless. Banners unfurled, gongs lifted. Delegates formed queue, each clutching pouch of earth. The dragon egg, nested on black velvet, gleamed opal now, veining almost translucent. Crack widened since night. Faint hissing escaped like breath through reed flute. Velen murmured that gas of metamorphosis must vent. Nothing to fear. Jon stood right of dais. Daenerys left, their cloaks stitched at seam, literal joining. When First Lord approached, scattered cheers swelled. Soil fell into basin, mixing hues. Pale reached loam, atop black basalt chips. Music drifted, harp, drum. Children perched on shoulders, eyes bright. Halfway through line, a figure stepped forth none recognized, tall, wrapped in gray pilgrim robe, hood shadowed face. But charter required any free soul bearing soil may vow, so guards let pilgrim advance. He kneeled, head bowed. From sleeve he withdrew vial. Soil inside glimmered pale as ground bone. He upended it into basin. Where moats touched, steam rose, quiet, colorless. John's nose caught bitter almond. He moved, too late. The pilgrim flung robe aside, revealing cuirass of glass scales, each segment swirling silver mist. Dot. Face masked in polished obsidian, carved twin to eclipse crow sigil. The egg shrieked. Sound beyond hearing, yet felt in marrow. Shell split. A geyser of white flame, cold as void, burst upward. Basin clay erupted, splattering. People screamed. The masked man hurled second vial at Daenerys. John lunged, catching glass. It burst, slicking his mail with freezing liquid that smoked and ate steel. Pain seared, but he held ground. Guards rushed. The attacker leapt onto dais, gloved hand plunging toward newborn crack and egg. From fissures spewed radiant frost fire, searing air with crystalline shards. Daenerys shouted a command none understood. Drogon's roar answered overhead. Roof timbers groaned as dragon crashed through smoke. Cloaked attacker retreated, turning vial upon Jon again. But ghosts slammed him from flank. Vial shattered harmlessly. The man rolled, sprang swift. He drew stiletto of mirror glass, slashing ghost. Cut glanced. He bounded, using confusion, darted toward western arch. Arya appeared there, cloak singed, sword in reverse grip. She blocked passage. The man pivoted, knives twirling like shards of moon. They clashed, needles thin steel against glass blade. Each parry rang odd, as though glass sang. Arya feinted, wheel slashed. Shard snapped. Masked man hissed and hurled broken dagger. It buried in a bystander's throat. Using moment, he vaulted rail, landing amid benches, sprinting. Tyrion toppled brazier in his path. Flames licked, but he leapt, boots barely skimming coals. Jon chased despite, burning mail biting flesh. Pain drowned by rage. Gendry barreled from side, hammer raised, yet assailant slid beneath swing, lashed pommel into Gendry's knee, cracked. At gate arch, Linya Waters swung a staff, the shepherd's crook she carried as symbol. Blow struck mask, shattering half. A man's face showed, gaunt, cheek scarred by alchemist burns, eyes two different colors, one pale blue, one molten gold. He rasped, for the faceless sun. Then he spat glass dust into Linya's eyes, and vanished through billowing cloak of smoke. Outside, chaos as small folk stampeded. Rider in gray awaited. He mounted, arrowed off. Archers tried. Wind swallowed shafts. Inside, Daenerys knelt by egg. Crack widened, flakes sloughing. Within glowed a core of churning light, neither flame nor ice, but swirling mix. She laid palms gently. Easy, child. Her voice trembled. Vibration settled. Hiss faded. Shell fissure calmed to hairline. Velen, panting, dabbed brow. Never have I seen such reaction. He meant to abort birth with reagent of absolute frost. Sorcery beyond alchemists. Jon staggered, mail smoking. Daenerys rushed to him, poured water, chemical neutralized. Pain laced, but he stood. He surveyed hall. Wounded littered benches, yet no wildfire, no conflagration. Attack failed but shook pillars of trust. Bran's chair rolled in, guided by Podrick. Bran studied residue on floor. Stone sings again, he whispered. But harmony costs. Council convened emergency summit that night. They posted triple guards. Maesters tended the egg in chamber lined with padded silk. Hiss now mild, shell recalcifying, swirling colors lavender and frost. Their discussion circled. Who orchestrated? Motive either to kill queen or steal egg. Tyrion argued bank conspirators. Sansa suggested remnant of Aurora cult, fearing balance shift. Valen posited rogue master faction. Arya placed broken glass dagger on table. Runes etched inner blade formed 6-point spiral. Valen traced them. Language of Dawn Age, pre-Valerian. Bran touched blade and eyes whitened. Room stilled. He spoke in voice old as winter. From far the shadow they come, children of thrice-born star. Ice not ice, fire not fire. They seek seed of balance to shatter cycle, birth new dusk. He blinked, young again. They call themselves Eclipse Spear. Silence. Jon said. Then they will strike again. Against what binds ice and fire. Us Daitui. Daenerys met his gaze. We end it before they gather. How? Gendry asked. We don't know where they roost. Arya slid medallion of many-faced mask beside dagger. Old tongues in cave called. Swan's arrival. The Braavosi ships may be decoy. Real meeting at Isle of Faces. Vel impaled. That isle is warded by green men. Wards weakening. Bran murmured. I feel them cry. Decision forged. Strike first. Not armies. Swift task force. Drogon, Razir, Kaelian Tartares, Jon, Daenerys, Arya, Davos, Linya. Despite her eyes bandaged, she refused stay. Plus small honor guard of river knights who knew lake currents. Sansa would hold council. Tyrion manage camp. Gendry stand sentinel over Egg. At dawn they launched skiffs from Harrenhal boathouse. Mist clung heavy. Bran watched from parapet, ravens clouding sky. As hulls slipped silent, Bran whispered to wind. Guide the dragon wolf. Let old promises hold. Rows of willows bowed like penitents, as skiffs glided across the god's eye. Sun, an orange smear rising behind castle. Water glassy, reflecting each paddle stroke. Drogon shadowed overhead. Smaller dragons perched on gunwales, wings tucked. Near center of lake, air cooled unnaturally. Breath puffed though summer. Frost rhymed oar handles. Linya shivered though fever still burned eyes. Island's forest loomed, crown of ancient oaks veined with mistletoe. From within came drumbeats. Low, arrhythmic, like giants' uneasy heart. They beached on pebble shore. Reeds parted to moss path. Scattered white faces carved in heart trees watched. Tears of red sap, fresh though bark centuries old. Davos muttered prayer. They advanced. Arya ranged ahead, blades unsheathed. At glade center, stone circles ringed shallow pool black as tar. Above water hovered faint glow. Ripples of moonlight though day. Jon felt scalp prickle. Power thick here. Figures emerged round stones, green robes, antler helms, the legendary green men. Yet some robes charred, helms dented. Their faces bore sorrow. Leader stepped forward, spoke in first tongue. Bran had taught Jon enough to grasp fragments. Desecration, strangers, heart of isle taken. Daenerys answered in Valyrian. Davos translated rough. They learned intruders days past breached sacred mound, bore chest of obsidian milk glass, the stone that sings wrong song. It drank sap of weirwood roots, poisoning Dream River. Green men fought, 6 slain. The enemy vanished into pool's mirror. Bran's vision of wrong melody suddenly clear. Daenerys stepped to water's edge. Ripples parted though no wind. She saw faint image beneath. Subterranean cavern, pillars of petrified weirwood, at center pedestal of jade where chests sat open. Orb glowing twilight hue. But how reach? Arya skimmed hand, cold bit like winter dawn. Portal, part. Jon unslung Longclaw. Then we dive. Green men murmured warning. Threshold succumbs to neither air nor drowning. It is dream. Only mind anchored by purpose can pass. Daenerys removed cloak. Our purpose is clear. She clasped Jon's hand. Together, they stepped forward. Surface swallowed them without splash. Weightlessness, then firm ground. Yet they stood within vast cavern painted by shifting colors. Roots hung like veins, pulsing pale blood. Orb atop pedestal, radiated swirl of ice fire, identical to Egg's glow. Before it knelt, masked figures, chanting in tongue like shards on slate. Leader turned, man from Harrenhal, mask half broken. "You cannot unmake Eclipse," he said. "Balance births void. Void devours cycle." Jon raised sword. "You seek chaos. Rebirth." He gestured. Acolytes drew blades of milk glass, facets shimmering. Behind them orb throbbed. Each pulse sent shock through roots, sap trickling. Visions flickered. Wall collapsing. Seas boiling. Sky turning amethyst. One day, Jon and Daenerys felt the membrane of the lake dream harden underfoot, as if they trod a sheet of living crystal. The cavern's air tasted of cold ash and lightning. Half-formed voices whispered behind the walls, echoes of the weirwood's oldest memories, slithering out through cracks the intruders had hammered into the roots. Pale threads of light swung between stalactites, like the strands of some colossal spider, each vibrating with a different note. Every breath carried music, but the melody lay wrong. As Bran had warned, minutely off-key, tilted toward a cadence that promised endings rather than cycles. The masked devotee, his burned cheekbone glowing waxily in the orb light, raised his palm. From the dark flowed 6 more figures. Sleeves trailing silver dust that did not fall but clung to the air in swirls. Each wore armor of translucent plates. Scales fused like drifts of snow caught and frozen in storm glass. Under the masks, their eyes gleamed the bizarre golden blue of flame reflected in ice. Daenerys slipped sideways. Jon followed, boots rasping on crystal floor. Behind them, the spears of 2 green men plunged through the portal, then the antlered warriors themselves, stag horns clattering against cavern roof. Davos appeared next, dragging Lenya Waters, whose bandages now lay discarded. Sight still blurred, she leaned on a short Dornish blade, yet moved with grim, blind certainty toward the chanting acolytes. Razir's damp roar echoed from the portal mouth, though the dragon could not pass. Its cry shivered roots high overhead, showering thin flakes of heartsap that hissed where they landed near the orb. The leader spoke again, his voice like shards of obsidian shaken in a clay cup. "The dragon womb must break. When pearl shell bleeds into the river of time, the hinge of history shatters, and night without memory devours dawn." He spread fingers. Snow-fine dust drifted from his glove, each mote glowing. Where they touched the floor, the crystal darkened, turning from glass to onyx. The stain crept with silent hunger. Jon scanned for advantage. Stalagmites grouped near the orb, narrow bridge to pedestal, deeper shadows beyond where root pillars thickened. Running would gift the cultists time. Talking would feed their spell. So he raised Longclaw, luminous runes winking in the icy glow, and said only, "You'll break nothing but yourselves." He charged. Daenerys matched him, unclasping the twinned daggers Gendry had forged from a shattered Targaryen breastplate. Their edges flashed a wine-dark red as they met the first acolyte. Glass dagger clanged on Valyrian steel. Shards burst away, melting to vapor before they hit the ground. The acolyte hissed and whipped a gauntlet backhand. Jon ducked, felt a gust like winter gale skim his hair, then ran shoulder forward. The enemy weighed almost nothing, hollow bone wrapped in glass, and shattered against a root column in a spray of dust and splinters. But farther on, the leader reached the pedestal. His fingertips caressed the orb's swirling surface. The glow flared blinding white, then throbbed, liking hearing its master's heartbeat. Every root shook. From somewhere deep, something cracked open. Arya tumbled through the portal. Landing low, she rolled beneath the lunge of an acolyte, sprang, and drove needle into the soft joint behind the figure's knee. Glass popped. The cultist stumbled. She whipped around, slit the back of his calf, then his throat. With each slice, frost plume rose. She almost gagged at the cold. Each gush of bloodless vapor scraped lungs raw. Davos kept to Jon's left, short sword moving in tight arcs. He blocked a dagger, trapped the wielder's wrist beneath his elbow, and pivoted to slam that arm against rock. Bones cracked. The dagger clattered free. Lenya, though half-blind, whirled her staff in broad circles. Where the ash wood struck glass armor, it left spiderwebs of fracture. The dark spread underfoot, a stain of night glass creeping from where dust had landed. Jon slashed crosswise, severing an acolyte from hip to shoulder, and leapt back as the corpse dissolved to silver smoke that fell into the widening patch. Behind him, Daenerys felled 2 attackers with twin thrusts. But they kept coming, 8, 10, 12. Each death feeding the stain. It dawned on Jon that they bled shadow. The cavern floor drank it. The orb pulsed harder after every life surrendered. "Stop killing them on the crystal," Davos shouted, as another body collapsed and the patch widened. "It feeds the damn stone," Jon cursed. "Draw them to the edges." He parried his swipe and dashed sideways across a rib of rock that jutted like bridge from wall to pedestal. 2 acolytes pursued, their glass boots ticking. Midpoint, he dropped to a knee, reversed grip, and plunged long claw into the bridge rib. Crystal groaned. He heaved. The rib cracked, shearing in 2. All 3 dropped. Jon caught an icy lip one arm. The cultists plunged into nothingness, a gulf where roots hung suspended over infinite pale light. Their bodies fell and fell, shrinking to pinpricks, vanishing. Daenerys sprang onto an adjoining root. She raced across its curve, hair streaming silver behind. At the pedestal, she met the leader. Their eyes locked, hers alive with fire, his molten with moon. "You come too late," he crooned. The hinge unpins. His hand pressed deeper into the orb. The shell bulged outward, forming spiderweb cracks of its own. Dull booming echoed in the weirwood trunks above, as though hearts too large for bark pounded emergency. Daenerys lunged low, slashing at wrist. Glass armor deflected but blade bit beneath. Pale ichor seeped. He snarled. A coil of dark sprayed, ash motes that hardened mid-air into barbs. She twisted aside. 3 needles grazed her arm, slicing cloak and drawing a shimmer of blood. Where drops hit crystal, the floor glowed red-gold instead of black. The 2 colors warred, sun-tinged circles against creeping night. Jon climbed chin over the edge, panted, then hurled himself toward pedestal. He slid between roots that writhed now, twisting in pain or fury. Atop the platform, the orb whined like wind through 1,000 reeds. Daenerys and the masked leader circled each other. The dragon daggers smoked where they'd cut. The leader's left arm hung limp. Jon stepped onto the dais. "End it. Step away." "Men." The leader's mismatched gaze flicked over Yon's shoulder, to Arya flitting past shattered columns, to Lynia kneeling mid-floor, hands pressed on creeping patch, murmuring prayer that called green sparks from cracks, to Davos and green men holding acolytes at perimeter so dark could not advance. The leader laughed, a sound brittle as hoarfrost. "We are many. Kill me, and you kill a spark. The eclipse consumes a sun born of rot." He pressed both palms to orb. A seam split across its top. Through it glimmered swirling void. Daenerys shouted Valyrian words. Drogon's roar exploded above, as if echo answered. Flame gushed through portal, a torrent white-hot. It struck the cavern vault and cascaded over root pillars, a deluge of cleansing fire that avoided pedestal, curving like serene river diverted by unseen banks. Heat and frost collided. Steam whirled in furious spirals that screamed like dying gulls. The glass floor quivered. Jon charged. Leader swung an arm, a ghostly blade materialized, long as spear, forged of that same night glass. Jon met it with Longclaw. Sparks, black and purple, erupted, sizzling across pedestal. Every parry sent shock into Jon's bones. He felt his joints numb, but pressed. The angled sword slid under, nicked the man's thigh. Shadow bled again. On the other side of orb, Daenerys darted in, carving slash up ribcage. The mask shattered fully. Beneath, half the man's face remained frozen in sudden sculpture of ice. Gold iris cracked, spilled motes. He screamed, and lunged to hurl himself bodily at the orb. Jon slammed shoulder, grappling. Ice flesh razored his cheek. They grappled one breathless moment. Then Arya's needle punched through back of attacker's neck, tip jutting under chin. He jerked, hands spasming. Jon wrenched free. The cultist stumbled, sagged across the orb, and it swallowed him, surface liquefying. In a blink he was pulled inside, like fish snapping mayfly. The orb sealed. Silence hammered. The glow dimmed to sullen ember. The creeping night halted. Cross cavern, surviving acolytes collapsed. Armor disintegrating to dull frost. Root columns ceased writhing. The hush felt like aftermath of thunder. Arya wiped steel. Next time, she rasped, I cut sooner. Daenerys crouched, touching seam on orb now smooth again. It sleeps, but the poison lingers. She scanned floor. Linya lay unconscious, surrounded by pale petals of glass cracked off the stain. Davos knelt, checking pulse. He lifted thumb, alive. Can we move this thing? Jon asked. Valen, who'd braved portal last, tottered forward. To disturb the heart now could tear whatever membrane divides worlds. But we may cage it. He produced small vials of maester-forged quicksilver lead paste. Paint wards of mirror steel. It will reflect its own discord, stalling growth. The green men joined, raising chant that hummed like sap flowing. Together, they forged ring of silver around pedestal, brazing it to crystal. Arya fetched lengths of raw weirwood root severed in battle. Davos wedged them as braces. Daenerys pressed palm to orb once more. A memory flashed inside. Dragon's egg. Pearl shell, stilled flame. She withdrew, nodding. Portal behind rippled. They filed through carrying Linyata. On shore Drogon crouched, eyes firecat gold in dawn. Razor and Kalian circled. The isle stood silent, ancient oaks groaning relief. Green men knelt. Jon bowed back. As skiffs shoved off, Daenerys gazed over shoulder. Wind stirred willow cirques. Just beyond she thought she saw a pale woman standing, face veiled by moonlit leaves. But next blink, only bark. Harrenhal's bells rang at their return. Sansa met them in courtyard, cheeks drawn tight with worry. The pearl egg sat in wooden cradle behind her, ringed by soldiers. It started again, she whispered. Cracks glowing. We feared. Daenerys laid calloused hand, then smiled wearily. The glow had softened. Heartbeat steady. It felt the breach and answered. She said, now the wound is stitched. See, it rests. Jon looked to maesters. Double watch anyway. Shadows rear their heads still. He turned. Linya approached, eyes clearing at last. She carried mask fragment Arya had retrieved. We'll need to show the realm proof of what we fought, she said. Else rumor wields pen sharper than needle. Tyrion sidled, parchment thick with reports. Rumor already gallops. Word of attack spreads like wildfire. Pardon. Bank emissaries arrived brandishing debts older than dragons. If we can link the Eclipse Spear to their coffers, we may seize assets to fund new healers' guilds. Jon sighed. One war ends, the next begins in ledgers. He clasped Tyrion's shoulder. But ledgers we can fight with quills, not swords. Over the following fortnight, Council ratified final charter clauses. The Vale agreed to rotational tithes. Dorne's princes accepted mixed tribunals in exchange for desert trade road. Northern clans swore blood price for rebels, but embraced new grain, levy relief. The egg remained centerpiece. Gently throbbing, always watched. Children of camp drew pictures of pearl dragon. Bards coined verses. Fear turned story. Story into hope. On 15th day, under clear dusk, a fissure parted along egg circumference with whisper like cloth torn distant. Council gathered, even Bran descended. From within, burst first a plume of soft frost steam. Then a nose. Sleek, snow-white scale stippled in faint silver. A hatchling wriggled free. Wings, translucent as moth. It shook, scattering diamond droplets that evaporated, leaving no damp. Its eyes opened. Twin pools swirling blue opal, ringed by ember flecks. It squeaked. Drogon, perched on tower, rumbled answers so low the stones trembled. Yet the hatchling did not cower. It fluffed wings and loosed a breath that shimmered. a coil neither flame nor vapor but sparkling mix that frosted straw, yet warmed the fingers of those nearest. Daenerys knelt. The creature tottered into her palm, its claws pricked like winter stars. It nestled, cooing. Jon brushed back a curl from Daenerys' brow, watched awe fill crowd. Archmaester Velen spoke first. "By what name?" Daenerys glanced at Jon, then at Bran. The boy king's gaze reflected swirl of hatchling's breath. "Name it Equinox," Bran said. "Where night and day share the sky." Cheers erupted. Equinox trilled, flapping tiny wings. Frostwarm moats drifted, settling on lords and small folk alike. Where they touched frayed banners, cloth mended. Where they kissed cracked helms, steel smoothed. Some called miracle. Valen called reaction of latent magic, catalyzed by balanced draconic essence. Tyrion quipped, "Cheaper than armorers." But Jon heard deeper note. The cavern's wrong song replaced by chord that resonated across stones. He felt it thrumming in his chest. A lining heartbeat. Daenerys squeezed his hand till knuckles ached, steadying anchor between them. Peace takes longer to write than war, yet lines were laid. The eclipse spear remnants scattered. Coast watchers reported singular riders on pale horses, fleeing east toward the Shadowlands. Arya embarked west in a caravel named Dawn Wolf, Needle at her side, promising to hunt echoes. Davos returned to White Harbor to oversee new fleet. Ships built equal for trade and defense. Linya organized order of candlebearers, healers who carried glass lanterns lit by Equinox frost flame that sterilized wounds without searing flesh. A marvel that saved dozens when spring pox swept a river village. Gendry's knee mended, he forged new coin dies bearing twin sigils. Direwolf intertwined with dragon circling Pearl Star. Currency minted funded roads joining far coasts with winter town markets. Tyrion, ever scheming for calm, negotiated with Iron Bank. Half of Crown's debt forgiven in exchange for exclusive trade rights on frost flame lamps, a commodity they scarcely understood but were eager to peddle east. Jon thought it dangerous, but Daenerys argued knowledge unshared curdles. They bound contract with clause, preventing military application, punishable by dragonfire and council sanction. Equinox grew fast, feeding on mixture of drift herring and ember charcoal. Within months, its wingspan matched a warhorse length. At night, it patrolled skies, leaving shimmering contrails seen as aurora across crownlands. Farmers slept easier knowing frostflame deterred locust storms. Children recited lullabies where snow warmed fields rather than killed them. Yet always the charter's heartbeat depended on watchfulness. Scout ravens brought word of slavers murmuring in gulf of grief, of corsairs baptizing blades in names of dead gods, of Korth warlocks weaving illusions of eclipse in alley mirrors. The world writhed, not yet tamed. One spring twilight, Jon and Daenerys walked ramparts of Dragonstone. Rebuilt keep now serving as council's southern seat. Waves bludgeoned cliffs, Equinox swooped, practicing dives beneath Drogon's amused gaze. Jon breathed salt, tasted copper memory of battles far dark. "We have quiet," he said. She nodded, leaning head on his shoulder. "Until noise returns. We'll meet it together." She lifted fingers. Frost flame danced along tips, lighting their faces in turquoise blush. "Together," she echoed. Below, lanterns of fisherfolk bobbed like stars fallen to sea. Above, half-moon shone. Between the two spheres, one of icefire, one of stone, Jon and Daenerys stood at the hinge of seasons, guardians of balance wrought from snow, blood, and the fragile courage of hope. Aka. Years began to slide past as softly as the tides brushing Dragonstone's black beaches, each season leaving its subtle mark upon the realm Jon and Daenerys shaped together. The first winters following Equinox hatching were gentle, as though some ancient wound in the world had started to mend. No long night fell, though nights sometimes stretched long with dreams of the strange darkness below the Isle of Faces. Peace, when it came, was not the blinding joy sung in old ballads, but a persistent, necessary labor. Harvest by harvest, market by market, court by court. The small folk called it the Frostfire Era, For the marvels born of the council's balanced rule, and the dragon whose breath could chill or warm at a whim. Equinox, white as snow and limned with threads of silver and blue, became symbol and mystery, growing with an intelligence both eerie and kind. Children flocked to Winterfell's yards and the palace terraces of King's Landing, their laughter trailing behind as Equinox swooped low, stirring flakes and flower petals alike into the air. In the south, wildflowers blossomed even in the months before the equinox and after, coaxed from soil by the dragon's breath. In the north, famine was lessened each winter by new root cellars cooled with gentle frost. The Charter Council proved more resilient than its founders had dared hope. Every 10 years, seats shifted. Sansa ruled as Queen of the North, but she traveled often, making herself as much at home in the south as at White Harbor or Last Heart. Gendry, once awkward as a hammer in a lord's hand, now presided over a new league of guilds, helping smiths and shipwrights, vintners and weavers, earn coin and voice alike. Tyrion found joy, and some measure of peace, in weaving trade treaties and clever compromises across the narrow sea. Linya Waters, the healer, forged a doctrine of learning open to women, bastards, and even the children of the free folk who now settled river valleys and mountain slopes under the protection of the council. Bran's sight faded from daily life, though his ravens still circled the skies. The story grew among children that the Lord of the Weirwoods had become part tree himself, and on the eve of each equinox, a white raven would appear, a living reminder that some eyes watched over more than gold or steel. For Jon and Daenerys, Peace's work was endless and absorbing. In the north, they oversaw the planting of new godswoods. Greenheart and pine mingled with weirwood shoots coaxed to take root far south of the old line. In the south, they watched the shanty towns shrink as new trades opened, and the first festivals of frost and flame were held to mark the passing of night and the coming of light. Once, when a fire broke out in Old Town's poorest quarter, Equinox came at Daenerys' bidding, dousing the blaze with curling breath that froze embers to harmless ash. Yet the world beyond their borders refused to still. The Iron Islands splintered in a dozen feuding petty kingships, refusing the council's laws but too fractious to threaten their neighbors. In the east, the cities of Slaver's Bay tried to rekindle old trade in flesh and fire. Their galleys found themselves hounded by a pair of dragons, for Drogon and his kin would sweep out of dawn or dusk and send the slavers' fleets to the bottom. Word spread quickly. Soon there were few who dared test the council's resolve. The greatest threat did not come from iron nor gold, but from the slow shadow of old beliefs and new discontents. There were always lords who resented the presence of small folk and free folk at the council, priests who whispered that magic itself was an abomination, conspirators who sought to turn the dragon's balance to their favor alone. In the 5th year of peace, a new crisis brewed, not of swords or sorcery, but of hunger and pride. The Riverlands had enjoyed 3 lush harvests, but a blight swept the fields. Some said it came on the boots of Braavosi traders. Others that it was a curse laid by a lord denied his seat. Wheat shriveled, oats turned black, and the old pain of want pressed hard against the smallfolk. The council convened at Harrenhal, banners snapping along the wind-swept causeway. Jon, grayer at the temples but as lean and steady as he had been on the wall, rode beside Daenerys, whose silver hair now threaded with the faintest gold. "We cannot feed the realm by command alone," he said as they entered the old stone hall, "nor blame every storm on shadow." Daenerys nodded, her gaze drifting to the high window where the dragons circled. "But we can listen. We can be seen." Nandimoban. The assembly was tense, the council divided. Lord Vance of Wayfarer's Rest, gaunt and bitter from loss, demanded immediate release of all storehouses in the north. Lady Sansa, speaking calmly and with the voice of the north behind her, offered grain but asked for the Riverlord's engineers to help expand the north's canals and raise the first new weirwood groves in a century. Gendry proposed new forges and granaries, Linya new techniques for frost storage, learned from wildlings. Tyrion reminded all that food must move, not just be counted. Banditry had risen along the King's Road. The debate turned sharp. Old rivalries surfaced. For a time, the council seemed on the brink of splintering. It was Bran's voice, relayed through the lips of a quiet maester, that broke the deadlock. Share not only food, but knowledge. Let each lord learn what works beyond his wall. The harvest comes for all or none. Jon and Daenerys seized the moment. That night, they visited the tents of the common folk. Listened to tanners, millers, small village reeves whose names no bard had sung. The next morning, Jon addressed the lords from the steps of Harrenhal's battered keep. You made me your king, and then your counselor, not because I was born for it, but because I would not stand by and see the world burn. Today, the world withers, and all our banners mean nothing if children starve beneath them. What we do in this council echoes beyond stone and story. If you will not share what you have, if you will not learn what you do not know, then you are not lords. You are but shadows of those who came before you, and this realm will not survive a kingdom of ghosts. Daenerys. He let the words hang, cold as steel. Daenerys stepped forward, her voice warm as spring rain. You saw my dragons as conquerors once. Let them now be stewards. Let us teach you how to plant and reap as the free cities do. Let us give you frost flame to save what can be saved. We will ride ourselves to the smallest fields and work with your people until each valley feeds its own, and the realm as one. Slowly, the mood changed. The council voted to send teams of frost flame healers, wildling agrarians and guildsmen to every blighted village, and set a standing assembly to travel each year and hear the people's needs. In the weeks that followed, Jon and Daenerys kept their promise. Jon, rough-handed as any reaper, worked side by side with muddy boots and muddy faces. Daenerys, her laugh echoing across wet fields, knelt with children to plant new shoots, and listened to old grandmothers tell which seeds grew strongest in lean years. Equinox, now the size of a grown warhorse, carried water barrels and children, and once, when a barn fire threatened a harvest, froze the blaze with a breath. Even Drogon, aging but mighty, would land in the villages, frightening at first, but soon regarded as a sign the gods themselves had not turned away from Westeros. That winter passed easier than the lords had feared, and the next harvest was better. The memory of hunger faded, but the lesson remained. The council's strength was not in dragons, nor even in Jon and Daenerys, but in the willingness of many hands to labor together. Through the years, there were threats. A coup plot in the Reach, a failed poison attempt by an old alchemist who blamed Daenerys for the end of his order, a bandit lord on the King's Road who claimed to be the lost son of Rhaegar. But each was answered not only by steel, but by truth. A council that listened, judged and forgave, but never forgot. Children born in those years grew up knowing dragons as guardians, not terrors. They saw the council as something that could be questioned, even improved. Daenerys, in her 40th year, founded the Hall of Companions, a school for children of every blood and banner, where they could learn the healing arts, the history of both dragon and wolf, and the burden of choosing peace when war was always the easier answer. Jon grew slower, but not softer. He loved Daenerys with the same fierceness that once pulled him back from the brink in the darkness beyond the wall. Sometimes, in quiet moments, he wondered what the old gods and the new made of their efforts, if the songs would remember their choices as clearly as their victories. Sometimes at night, they would walk together through God's woods, planted in the north and south alike. The trees had grown tall, their faces gentle, their leaves red as memory. Daenerys would lean against Jon, and Equinox would circle overhead, painting the sky with aurora breath. "Do you think it will last?" Daenerys would ask, and Jon would answer what he always did. "If we choose every day to make it so. If we remember that justice is not what we wish for ourselves, but what we give to others." Now, when their children, first a daughter, then a son, were old enough to walk the godswoods, Jon taught them to listen to the wind, to find north by the moss, and to understand that being a Stark or a Targaryen or both meant little if they forgot the lessons of the council. Daenerys taught them to ride, to hold a quill and sword, and that dragons, like people, responded to kindness and courage before they would answer to fear. Their daughter Rhael had her mother's fierce eyes and her father's quiet strength. She tamed the second hatchling born to Equinox, a golden green dragon, swift and curious as the wind. Their son, Eddard, learned the words of the old tongue from Bran, and it was said the godswoods whispered his name when he passed. Years passed. Some old friends fell away. Arya never returned from the far west, though her letters, strange and vivid, arrived every few years, tales of lands where the sun set for days, or seas that boiled with color. Sansa grew gray, her hair streaked with white, and one year she did not return to the council. Her body was buried in the shade of a Greatheart tree planted by Jon and Daenerys themselves. Gendry ruled Storm's End with a just hand, and more than once rode north to hunt with Jon and teach his son to forge. Tyrion became master of ships, and his laughter, rarer now, but deeper, could sometimes be heard in the Hall of Companions, telling tales to the children. In time, Jon and Daenerys grew old. The council changed, more small folk, some free folk, even Ironborn sent a voice. The charter survived coup, fires, even the death of 2 dragons to old age. The world was not healed, but it had not broken. One last time, Jon and Daenerys climbed the highest hill above Winterfell, now crowned with godswoods and gardens, where the first snows of winter fell silent as hope. Together, they watched their children, their grandchildren, the dragons, the banners of 100 lords and villages, the simple folk with hands worn from honest labor. Jon felt Daenerys' hand, still strong in his, as it had been that day so long ago on the ramparts. "Did we do enough?" she asked. "We did what we could," he said, "and we taught them to do the rest." Beneath the falling snow, Equinox soared, a streak of living light across a world no longer broken. The wind carried the scent of frost and fire, of memory and promise. In the hush of the first winter's night, Jon Snow and Daenerys Targaryen stood together, rulers not of thrones but of hope, and watched the realm they'd forged continue without them, a land ruled at last with justice. And the stories that followed, of dragons and wolves, of justice and mercy, of all the long work of peace, spread across the world, outliving the men and women who had begun them. And even after the names were forgotten, the songs and the charter remained, echoing through the ages, a promise renewed each day, each equinox, for all the years to come. On a windswept morning in the autumn of their shared reign, Jon Snow awoke before the bell that summoned the council, the castle stone still radiating the night's coolness. He lingered by the window, eyes tracing a flock of crows wheeling over the stubble fields north of Harrenhal, where wheat stubble glimmered like gold in the slanting dawn. Below, the banners of the great houses drooped, heavy with mist. Daenerys slept on, her silver hair spread across the pillows, her brow smoothed in rare peace. He studied her a long moment before dressing and heading out. Quiet, careful not to wake her, though he knew she never truly slept deeply anymore. Not since she'd first held power, not since dragons had first hatched in the fire. Ghost joined him in the corridor, his old friend a silent shadow. The direwolf's muzzle had grown whiter with age, but his eyes burned bright as ever. Together they moved through the castle's waking quiet. Servants rising, guards changing shift, kitchens filling the air with the scent of bread and broth. In the council chamber, Sansa was already at her place, reading by the fire. Linya Waters arrived soon after, her healing satchel at her side, and then Gendry, whose hands still bore fresh scars from the forge. Tyrion came last, a stack of parchments beneath his arm, his gait slowed but not his wit. The matters of the day were neither war nor hunger, but the relentless labor of rule, a dispute between shipwrights of Old Town and White Harbor, the tallying of last season's fish catch, a bill for the repair of a storm-damaged bridge. Reports had arrived from the freefolk settlements along the Gift. One chieftain petitioned for permission to cut timber farther east. Another brought word of a new kind of grain that grew even in the thinnest soil. Small folk from the Reach had sent a petition for a week of mourning after a fever swept their valley, and a delegation from the Vale requested protection for caravans after 3 were robbed in the mountain passes. The council moved through each matter with patience, and, when needed, steel. Jon listened more than he spoke, but when the moment called for it, his words fell with the weight of the wall itself. Daenerys joined them at mid-morning, sweeping in with a smile that brightened the room as she settled beside him. She listened to the grievances, but her mind was already on the horizon. In her hand, she toyed with a tiny model of a ship, a new design from a shipwright in Pentos, that she hoped would cross the summer sea more swiftly. Midday, news arrived from the south, a flare of trouble in Dorne. A minor house had refused the council's tithe, expelling tax collectors, claiming ancient rights, and citing the charter's own promise of regional freedom. There was an old anger in the words, but also hunger. Years of drought, the border streams running thin, and more sheep dying than being born. Daenerys listened to Tyrion's counsel, to Sansa's careful parsing of law, but at last set down her cup and declared she would go herself. "We are not so distant as we once were," she said. "Let them see us as we are, not as rumor paints us." Within a day, Daenerys and Jon set forth, the silver and white of their banners flying high. They rode out from Harrenhal with a small party, Davos as their advisor, 2 guards sworn to the Queen, and Linya, who never traveled without her salves and herbs. Ghost and Equinox both came, the direwolf patting at Jon's heel, the dragon gliding overhead, its wings catching the sun. The journey south was long but not hard. In every village they passed, the people gathered to watch. Some were wary, but most greeted the rulers with simple gifts: bread, salt, and in the reach, a basket of late summer pears. Once, a troop of children ran after Equinox, throwing flowers and laughing as the dragon tossed his head and made the petals dance in the air. At night, they camped beneath the stars. Daenerys would sit by the fire and talk of her childhood, of stories told to her by Sir Willem and her brother Viserys before madness took him. Jon listened, and sometimes told his own stories, of the wall, of battles lost and won, of the darkness that had nearly drowned the world. He told her what he had learned. Peace is not the reward, Dany. It is the price. Every day we must earn it again, for ourselves and for those who come after. In Dorne, the wind carried the dry heat of autumn. They arrived at the stronghold of House Toland to find the gates barred. The banner of the dragon curled tight and unmoving. Atop the wall, Lady Toland herself stood with her council, her eyes sharp. "You come as rulers or as guests?" she called. Daenerys rode forward. "Both, if you'll have us." It was a long standoff, the air thick with the possibility of violence. But at last, the gates swung open. In the shadow of the palmettos, they broke bread together. Lady Toland spoke of hardship, fields barren, children sick, trade gone to Bravos and Volantis, where gold flowed freer than in King's Landing. Daenerys listened, Jon silent at her side. When the wine was poured, Daenerys set her cup down and spoke of what the council could offer. Seeds for drought-resistant crops, healing, the sending of frost flame mages and healers to cool the fields and wells. In exchange, she asked only one thing: that Dorne send its cleverest children north, to study and return with knowledge and new hope. The deal was made not with gold, but with handshakes and the binding of wounds. Lady Toland wept when she saw Equinox's frost flame bring coolness to her dying olive trees. For the first time in years, green shoots sprang up within the wheat. Word of this spread quickly, and by the time Jon and Daenerys returned to Harrenhal, peace had taken deeper root. Not everywhere, of course. There were always those who tested the council, who claimed old grievances. In the Westerlands, a cabal of gold miners tried to smuggle debts through the Iron Bank. In the north, wildlings and old bannermen still sometimes clashed in drunken brawls. But the charter endured. Equinox grew, maturing into a full-grown dragon whose breath could heal frost-bitten limbs or warm the bones of the dying. It became a mark of honor, in those days, for a village to be visited by the White Dragon. Each year Daenerys and Jon would send out word, and Equinox would visit those who had most struggled. A living sign that the rulers of Westeros remembered even the smallest places. As the years passed, change rippled out from the council's reforms. The Hall of Companions, founded in the heart of the Crownlands, became the greatest school in Westeros. There, The children of lords and small folk studied together, learning medicine, law, the histories of every land, and the languages of the free cities. Linya Waters became its first headmistress, remembered in story as the gentle flame. Bran's writings, his stories of the first men, of the children, of all that he had seen, were read alongside tales of the Long Night and the Dragon Queens. Sansa's treatises on law and Tyrion's lessons on trade spread in copied books throughout the realm. Jon Daenerys grew older. Jon's hair silvered, his stride grew more deliberate. Daenerys' eyes never lost their light, but her laughter softened, her voice growing more thoughtful. Together they would still ride when called. North to Winterfell for the blessing of a new heart tree, south to Dorne when a new aqueduct was opened, west to Old Town for the founding of the realm's first free hospital. Their children grew, Rahel wild and bright, her mother's courage in her eyes, Eddard serious and clever, with Jon's sense of duty and Bran's insight into the hearts of men. There were still moments of darkness. One bitter winter, Equinox fell ill. His scales dulled and his breath turned weak. The best healers could do little. Daenerys sat by his side through a night of snow and prayer. And in the morning, when the sun rose and the frost melted, the dragon lifted his head, stronger. The realm rejoiced. Songs were sung from White Harbor to Sunspear. It was in their later years that Jon and Daenerys faced the greatest test of all, not a rebellion, nor a threat from without, but a threat from within. The weariness of years, the temptation to retreat into memory and let others lead. One spring, when the snows melted late and the rivers ran high, the council's hall filled with angry voices. A new generation, eager to shape the realm, chafed at the elders' caution. There were protests in King's Landing, calls for the dissolution of certain ancient rites, and the first rumors of those who would see dragons wielded as weapons again, not as healers. Jon called the council together, lords, commoners, students, even dissenters. The debates lasted days, tempers flared, old wounds bared. When all had been said, Daenerys rose. "I was born in exile," she told them. "I won thrones by fire, but lost everything when I tried to rule by force alone. Justice is not the will of one, or even of the few, but the balance between mercy and strength, between past and future. We have built this realm with your hands, your hope. Now, you must take it further. The council must be renewed by those who dream new dreams." It was agreed. The council's ranks would expand, its votes renewed by secret ballot, its power shared even more widely among the people. In that moment, Jon and Daenerys gave up their voting seats, remaining as advisors and as witnesses to what would come next. Their final years were quiet, spent in the halls of Winterfell and the gardens of Dragonstone. They watched their children and grandchildren carry forward the work, saw Equinox brood fly farther than any dragon before, and listened to the stories the people told. Stories of peace, of frost and fire, of rulers who chose hope and justice. On the last equinox of their reign, Jon and Daenerys walked together into the Godswood, the air cool and fragrant with fallen leaves. They sat beneath the heart tree, hand in hand, and spoke of all they had seen, all they had hoped for. Jon pressed her hand gently, his hair as white as the weirwood's bark. "Was it worth it?" he asked. She turned, her eyes shining with love and memory. Every day, the snows fell, and spring came. When the bells tolled from Winterfell to Sunspear, the realm paused, not in mourning, but in gratitude. For peace hard won, for justice shaped by many hands, for rulers who had given everything so the world might be better. The charter survived. The dragons soared. The people remembered. And through all the years that followed, in song and story, the tale of Jon Snow and Daenerys Targaryen, their marriage, their rule, their choices, endured as the dawn endures the night, a promise renewed, a realm ruled with justice. And so Westeros moved onward, ever changing, ever striving, ever remembering. In every hall where the wolf and the dragon's banners hung side by side, hope took root anew, as tireless and steadfast as the dawn. Did. Winter's edge came earlier than expected. creeping south on winds sharp as glass, and dusting the towers of Dragonstone with an icy glitter that shimmered like starlight on black basalt. Jon Snow, no longer young but still unbowed, paced the ramparts while the dawn blushed faint along the sea. The great hall lay quiet, save for the low crackle of embers. Daenerys, wrapped in a mantle lined with direwolf fur, read reports by candlelight, her features serene, yet her eyes tracking every word with the focus of a dragon watching from a high crag. The world they had built thrummed with fragile peace. The charter endured its 20th renewal, bringing another generation to council. Merchants from Gulltown, crannogmen from the Neck, the first Ironborn to ever cast a vote among the seats. Census reforms, now tradition, saw smallfolk challenge lordly decrees without fear. Gendry's guilds minted coins stamped with dragon and wolf. The silver circulated as far as the Spicetown docks. Linya Water's Order of Healers flourished, their blue-lanterned cloaks a welcome sight from White Harbor to Dorne's southernmost keeps. Equinox, now the size of a river barge, ranged the skies with two of his own brood. One dusk blue, one pearl, their shadows calming riots and sending slaver ships fleeing from the narrow sea. Yet peace, like frost, never settles evenly. Word reached the Council of Fires burning in the east, Valyria stirring, not with dragons, but with a swelling of bold magics and the return of ships from the ruins. The free city squabbled over the bones of a dying trade empire. The Summer Isles braced for drought and piracy both, and in the north the old gods were said to whisper restlessly through the roots of newly planted weirwoods. Jon's days filled with judgments and journeys. He rode often to Winterfell, sometimes alone, sometimes with Daenerys. There, beneath the ancient heart tree, he found a different quiet, a hush that reminded him of his first vows, when the wall was all the world, and winter, a distant, nameless fear. In those red-lit afternoons, he sometimes thought of Ghost's first hunt, of Bran's laughter, of Ygritte's song echoing in the frost, of every choice that had led him to this realm balanced. For now, between seasons, Daenerys governed with an ever wider vision. She summoned traders from far-off Ibn, teachers from Bravos, scholars from Enneath and Korth. Her own daughter, Rhaelle, led missions to the Summer Isles and returned with wild tales and new foods. Her son, Eddard, apprenticed at the Hall of Companions before setting off to trace the roots of magic in the dark forests north of the Wall. Daenerys watched her children's world grow larger than hers had ever been. Her pride mingled always with worry. In her rare moments of rest, she dreamt of fire and flight, dragons soaring over green fields and silver seas, and a peace that might someday no longer need their wings. Their lives wound through each other's days and seasons. Sometimes they would ride out together across the King's Road, incognito, buying meals with coins marked by their own sigils, listening to stories, tales that had grown grander and stranger as the years spun on. In the Riverlands, a blind bard sang of the marriage of frost and flame, of a king who had walked through death and a queen who had been reborn in fire, their dragons dancing above a land healed at last. In Old Town's bustling square, children told ghost stories of the Night King. Now a bogeyman used to frighten them into bed, not a terror waiting beyond the wall. At fairs and markets, lords and smallfolk mingled under banners that bore both wolf and dragon, and in every tongue the charter was cited as law. But the cracks appeared, as always. At the margins, old hatreds nursed their wounds. The most powerful merchant families of Lannisport, descendants of Lannisters now more lion in name than nature, clashed with guildsmen over taxes and tariffs. Ironborn raiders, stung by a century of humiliations, whispered of a new Kraken prince, half-mad, who had sailed farther than any before. The Faith, now less powerful, still harbored hardliners, some of whom condemned dragons and magic and called for a return to the true king's law. On a cold morning in the 28th year of their rule, a message came to Dragonstone, carried by a hooded crow, bred north of the Wall. Bran's seal, stamped in blue wax. Urgent. Jon and Daenerys read it by the dying fire. A darkness stirs beyond Skagos. The old dreams knot and snarl. Riders vanished, wildlings afraid to hunt. The heart trees bleed and will not speak. Jon gazed into the fire. It never truly ends, does it? Daenerys covered his hand with hers. Nor do we. We answer, as we always have. A council was called. Sansa, grown aged and revered, returned from White Harbor, now home to her daughter, and a host of grandchildren. Tyrion, hair gone to silver and his limp grown more pronounced, sent word from Braavos, promising ships and swords if needed. Gendry, now Lord of Storms End and Master of the Guilds, rode north with a retinue, carrying the new coin dies. Linya Waters led the Blue Lantern healers into the mountain villages, preparing for whatever plague or panic might come. Jon and Daenerys sailed north, accompanied by Rhael and Eddard, their grandchildren, and a chosen few, Maester Thea, Davos' grandson, 2 sworn swords from the companions, and the smallest of Equinox's brood, a green-scaled dragon named Daystar. They reached Eastwatch by the sea on a night when the sky burned with aurora, the wall a low line of frost in the starlight. There, wildlings awaited, led by an old woman whose eyes glowed faint blue in the moonlight. The shadows are wrong, she told Jon. We hear them walking. In the deep forests beyond Skagos, the heart trees bled sap thick and crimson, roots tangled with veins of jet-black earth. Eddard and Maester Thea spoke with the Greenseers, listening for whispers. Rhael visited the scattered villages, her dragon keeping watch overhead. At last, the old darkness revealed itself, not an army of the dead, but a sickness in the land itself, where the roots of weirwoods tangled with veins of glass, the legacy of the Eclipse Spear's magic. Animals fell ill, rivers ran brackish. Daenerys summoned every healer, every wise woman and wildling sage, while Jon walked the woods, seeking counsel from trees that once only whispered to Bran. One dawn, beneath a sky heavy with unfallen snow, Jon stood before a heart tree whose eyes wept black tears. Eddard knelt, hands pressed to the roots. It remembers the poison, he said. It fears what was left behind. Daenerys joined them, her hand on Jon's shoulder. What must we do? Eddard's voice was steady. We must bring light where the darkness lingers. They gathered all who could channel magic, wildlings and maesters, the old green men from the Isle of Faces, even a pair of quiet-robed priests from the east who had come at Daenerys' invitation. Together, they performed a rite that lasted through day and night. Songs in the old tongue, fire and frost joined, the dragon's breath clearing the dead leaves, while the blue lanterns of Linya's order illuminated every twisted root. At dawn, as the first snow began to fall, the black tears ceased. The roots brightened, the trees' leaves unfurled, and a hush passed through the forest, a sigh of relief, of memories untangled at last. Jon felt the old weight slip from his shoulders. Daenerys pressed her forehead to his, whispering, "We have done all we could." On their return they found the realm waiting, anxious but hopeful. Word of the healing rite spread like fire. Across Westeros, festivals sprang up. Villages lit blue lanterns at their doors in the dead of winter. And at spring's first thaw, children wove garlands for the heart trees. The old songs changed, weaving stories of the dragon wolf and the white queen, of their children and grandchildren, of a peace that grew not from conquest, but from tending the wounds of the world. Jon and Daenerys passed the final years of their reign walking those same woods, sometimes in silence, sometimes in laughter, always together. Their children and grandchildren carried on the work, the charter holding strong even as it bent to new needs. Equinox and his kin flew farther, ranging east and west, their contrails sparkling against the morning sky. The last winter came and went, cold but not cruel. When Jon at last grew tired, he took his leave in the godswood of Winterfell, beneath the great heart tree, whose face was weathered but calm. Daenerys stayed with him, her hand entwined with his until the end. She spoke quietly, of their years together, of dragons and dawns, of justice that never truly finished. Afterward she walked the ramparts alone, then with Rhael, Eddard, and their children. The realm mourned, but life did not pause. Daenerys ruled a little while longer, long enough to see the Charter's 100th revision, long enough to see her grandchildren take their oaths and to fly, once high above the wall on Equinox back, where the stars burned cold and beautiful as ever. Her last words at council were simple. Hold to the balance. Protect each other. Do not let old hate take root. Let every child see the dragons and know they are guardians, not doom. When she passed, the bells rang from Old Town to White Harbor. The dragons circled high above the new godswood, trailing frost and fire. Rael and Eddard, with their council, carried forward what had been begun so long ago. Not a perfect world, but a better one, season after season, striving, always, for justice. Through all the years that followed, the tales of Jon and Daenerys were retold and transformed, their faces carved into the doors of the Hall of Companions and painted on glass in the great sets. Some remembered them as dragon and wolf, some as king and queen, others simply as two who would not give up. Their words survived in every charter, their memory in every blue lantern, every frost flame festival, every heart tree garlanded in spring. And as long as the dragons soared and the wolf song echoed in the night, their promise endured, bright as dawn, that justice would not end, but begin anew, in every hand, in every heart, every day. Ka Nehoanchadi Dashib. Summer returned to Westeros in slow, uneven waves. A wet, thunderous season that left fields sodden and streams running fast. The air in King's Landing was thick with the scent of orange blossoms and river mud, and the city, no longer shadowed by fear of sack or famine, hummed with a patient confidence. Banners snapped on every street, some showing wolf and dragon entwined, some the new coin sigil of the council, some, especially in the poorer districts, the blue lantern of Lynia Water's healing order, a sign that aid could be found even here, among the cities forgotten. It was here, in the capital they had once approached with such caution, that Jon and Daenerys chose to spend their later years, neither as monarchs nor lords, but as the honored parents of a living charter. Their children, now grown and wise in their own right, traveled between the seats of power, tending the realm's needs with a practiced hand. Rael led the council's southern delegation, spending springs in Old Town and summers in the Dornish foothills, while Eddard kept to the north, his letters filled with news of new weirwoods, and the slow healing of land once poisoned by the eclipse spear. Jon, hair gone white, but still walking with a ranger's quiet grace, spent much of his time in the gardens behind the Red Keep, where the first godswood in the city's memory had been planted decades before. The old heart tree, grown from a northern sapling, stood tall now, its red leaves rustling in the warm breezes, its carved face softened by moss and time. Children from the city's orphanages would gather around it on festival days, listening as he spun tales of the Wall, of the Night King, of a time when courage meant standing alone in darkness. Daenerys spent her mornings among the healers and teachers of the city, her afternoons riding along the banks of the Blackwater on the back of a silver mare, or, when the wind was right, on the shoulders of Equinox, who even in the gentleness of his middle age still drew crowds in the city's fields. Her laugh, infectious and bright, echoed through the marble corridors and open squares. The people called her the White Lady, a title first given in half mockery by the old nobility but claimed, over years, by children and small folk as a name of respect and affection. Each year brought its challenges. Floods from the summer rains sent panicked refugees to the city gates, but the council's quick work, food stores moved, granaries opened, healers dispatched, kept hunger and disease at bay. Banditry in the Riverlands never fully disappeared, but the blue-lanterned patrols and Rael's hard-eyed justice kept the worst of it under control. In the north, the old troubles flared again when a bitter winter drove wildlings to quarrel with the descendants of Stark bannermen. But Eddard and his kin calmed them, holding moots under the heart trees and reminding both sides of the debts they owed to the realm and to each other. It was a season marked by marriages. Small folk and lord alike sought to wed under the godswood in King's Landing, in hopes that the wolf and the dragon, the fire and the frost, would bless their union. Equinox brood, too, matured. The blue-called sky was given to the wardens of White Harbor, while the Pearl Dawnstar became the symbol of the new Hall of Companions. and took to circling the city each dawn, wings flashing gold in the sunrise. With age, Jon and Daenerys became less visible at council, though their counsel was sought whenever the realm's course seemed uncertain. Tyrion, old and sharp as ever, would visit for long afternoons of debate and laughter, sipping summer wine as he recounted the folly of kings and the mischief of dragons. Gendry, slower now but no less stubborn, sent gifts from Storm's End, new coin dies, hammered steel, and sometimes simple letters recounting the happiness of his growing family. As the children of Westeros grew up with peace as their birthright, old ghosts faded. The faith grew gentler, its new high septon, a woman of small folk birth, preaching mercy over judgment, healing over punishment. The Ironborn, tired of exile and poverty, sent envoys to the council, and at last were given a voice, a single seat, shared between captains on the promise that no reaving ship would sail while the charter stood. Old Town's archmaesters sent their best healers to learn frost flame from Linya's order, and the brave Osi, seeing profit in peace, offered coin for roads, bridges, and new harbors. But not all accepted the new order. In the shadows of the city, a sect known as the Sons of the Red Tower began to gather. Men and women who saw magic as blasphemy and called for a return to old hard laws. They plotted in cellars and whispered of revolution, but their schemes found little purchase. Too many remembered the hunger, the wars, the burning of King's Landing. Too many had lived through the healing to wish for fire again. Jon sometimes walked among them in disguise, listening to the muttered doubts. He felt no anger, only a weariness and a great pity. The world doesn't heal all at once, he told Daenerys one night as they watched the city's lanterns blink on, one by one, in the dusk. Some wounds leave their mark, but we've done all we can. She laid her head on his shoulder. And if it ever fails, our children will begin again. That is all any of us can hope. In the 30th year since their wedding, the council convened for the grand festival of Frost and Flame, an event that now drew thousands from across the realm, filling the city's streets with song and color. The day began with the dragon flight, Equinox leading Dawnstar and Sky in broad circles above the city, their breath-weaving patterns of frost and light over the rooftops. The market square overflowed with foods from every reach: northern black bread, summer honey cakes, Dornish peppers, and arbor wine. The children of the Hall of Companions performed stories in every dialect, their voices mingling in the open air. At dusk, Jon and Daenerys were called to the Godswood for the last time, surrounded by children and grandchildren, by the council and the healers and smiths and teachers whose lives had intertwined with theirs. The heart tree stood red and solemn, its leaves whispering in the soft wind. Sansa's daughter, now Lady of Winterfell, read the words of the charter, her voice clear and unwavering. Daenerys, eyes bright with tears, took Jon's hand and spoke to the gathered. Every piece is fragile. Every flame must be tended. Every frost protected from darkness. Justice is not a word on parchment, nor a thing handed down from thrones. It is the slow, daily labor of listening, forgiving, and beginning again. We have done what we could. Now, let your work be better, your mercy greater, your whole unending. Jon, whose voice once rang only in command or in battle, spoke softly. Remember each other. Stand together. When darkness comes, let it find you with your hands joined. There were cheers and tears, laughter and song. As night deepened, the dragons rose again, their wings shining with fire and frost, lighting the city far below. Jon and Daenerys walked back through the quiet gardens, the festival's echoes fading behind. They paused beneath the old heart tree. The moon shone through the leaves, painting her hair silver and as pale as the northern snows. I never thought to live so long, Jon whispered. Nor I, Daenerys replied, smiling. But I'm grateful. For you, for them, for this world, broken and mended, again and again. No. He drew her close, and they stood in the hush, the past and future spinning softly around them, the city and the realm alive with possibility. In the years that followed, their legend grew gentler. Ballads spoke of the wolf and the dragon, of the Queen of Justice and the White King. of the charter that kept the peace and the dragons that watched the dawn. Their names passed into proverb. May your days be ruled with justice, as with snow and storm, folk would say in the north. Let your hopes burn bright, as with Daenerys fire, in the south. Their children carried on their work. Rael and Eddard in the council, their own children learning in the Hall of Companions. The dragons circling high above, guardians of a peace hard-earned. And so the realm endured. It changed, as all things must. But the memory of Jon and Daenerys, of justice and mercy, of hope in the face of all darkness, remained, as constant as the dawn and as bright as the dragons that soared above the land they had remade. In the end, when the last of the old banners faded, and the Godswood's red leaves drifted down to mingle with the new, the charter stood. And in every home where a lantern was hung, in every hall where a child learned to read, in every field where wheat grew tall beneath a watchful sky, the peace of Jon and Daenerys was renewed, quietly, steadfastly, with every hand and every heart. And the old heart tree's red leaves fell steadily, one by one, carpeting the King's Landing Godswood in velvet, sanguine hues. The city itself thrummed with new music, a chorus of laughter and industry, and the muted clang of distant forges. Overhead, dawn star and sky circled lazily on morning thermals, their wings flashing iridescent in the sun, the dragon's shadows sliding over tiled roofs and bustling squares. In the autumn of their lives, Jon and Daenerys found the world at peace, yet never quite still, a world where every triumph and loss had become another stone in a vast living mosaic. Jon rose before sunrise, habit from old wars and older watchful nights. He dressed quietly, his hands steady despite the pale scars on his knuckles and the streaks of white in his dark hair. He walked to the balcony and breathed deep the sea air. Brine, smoke, roasting bread, the ghost of frost carried from the north by the latest ship. Far below, the city's alleys coiled with life, bakers shouting, children running, the call and response of traders whose voices blended a dozen accents. He found Daenerys already awake, her cloak slung carelessly over one arm, her hair twisted into a braid by her granddaughter's careful hands. She was reviewing a stack of letters, petitions from the free cities, proposals for a new charter seat in the Isles, a formal request from Bravos to open a school of frostflame healing within its walls. She looked up as Jon entered, her smile gentle and undimmed. "You're up early," she teased. "Did you dream the city was under siege?" He grinned. "No one's dared since your dragons began nesting in the Sept's old bell tower." She stood, and together, they stepped into the light, descending through the palace's familiar halls. The guards nodded respectfully, but not stiffly. Most had served for decades, now training their sons and daughters in turn. Jon greeted each by name, pausing to clap a shoulder or offer a word of encouragement. They breakfasted in the shade of a grapevine-covered arbor, joined by Lynea Waters, whose hair was white as her healer's cloak, and by Tyrion, whose wit was undiminished, even as age bent his back. Gendry arrived in time to share news from the storm-lashed southern coasts. New forges opening in Dorne, the great windmill of Sunspear at last completed, his grandchildren racing wild horses along the salt-sprayed dunes. King's Landing is not what it once was, Gendry mused, tearing bread and passing it around the table. For the better, though. I remember when the streets stank of fear. Now the biggest worry is the Guild Council arguing over stone for the new bridge. Be grateful the worst arguments are over bridges and not blood, Tyrion said, sipping his wine. And if you wish for old King's Landing, you can always travel to Tyrosh. Their Archon still believes torture and gold are the only forms of persuasion. Daenerys smiled, but her thoughts were far away. Have you heard from Rael? She asked. She wrote last that she would visit from Old Town before the frost sets in. Jon nodded. She's halfway here by now. She wanted to see the last of the harvest markets. Their children were scattered to the winds, as children must be. Rael, ever curious and diplomatic, was now a beloved figure from the arbor to the Dornish marches, opening schools and clinics, negotiating rights for women and orphans, teaching the songs of the free folk to southern bards. Eddard had made a home in Winterfell, but journeyed off into the Wall, working with wildling elders and maesters alike to ensure the North's peace. When the meal ended, Daenerys rose, cloak swirling, and beckoned Jon to walk with her to the Godswood. There, under the dappled light, she drew close and whispered, "They ask for more than we can give, sometimes." Jon's hand found hers, calloused fingers threading together. "We give what we can. That's all anyone can do." She studied the heart tree. "Do you remember when we were young, Jon? When every decision seemed a war?" He nodded. "I remember, and I don't miss it." She smiled, resting her head on his shoulder. "Nor I, but I am grateful. Grateful that we saw the end of old things, and the beginning of new." They stood that way for a long time, until the bells of the city called out the hour and the council assembled in the great solar. The council now numbered nearly 30, its seats filled by a shifting tapestry of lords, free folk, merchant princes, healers, guildsmen, and 2 places, always reserved for those who'd begun as small folk and risen through merit alone. Raelle entered, as the proceedings began, her cheeks red from travel, her eyes alight with pride at the sight of her parents. She bowed her head briefly to them, then took her seat and began her report. "Grain yields are the highest since the long night," she announced, unrolling a map. "And Braavos has agreed to fund a new aqueduct, on the condition that Frost Flame mages oversee the construction." A murmur of approval swept the room. Eddard, his northern accent still thick, stood next. "The Free Folk want to send a delegation to the Southern Harvest Fair. They've bred a new strain of winter barley that may survive in the Riverlands. And the last bandit lord beyond the Wall surrendered. He asks only for safe passage south, in exchange for news of the farthest ice fields." "None?" Jon watched with quiet pride. The council was what he'd dreamed, no longer a court of fear and hierarchy, but a table of peers, each carrying the burden of peace with their own hands. Later, as the debate turned to minor disputes, taxes on salt, the price of horseshoe iron, the request from a sept in Lannisport to canonize Linya Waters as a living saint, Jon's thoughts drifted. He looked at Daenerys, at their children and friends, at the sunlight spilling through the stained glass that depicted not saints or kings, but ordinary people, smiths and healers, farmers and sailors, small folk and dragon riders alike. As the meeting closed, Daenerys called for a moment of silence, a tradition on the eve of frost and flame. The room stilled. Outside, the wind carried the echo of dragon wings, and from every window the banners of peace. Wolf and dragon, blue lantern and silver coin, shone in the light. That night, a feast spread across the palace, the city, the very fields beyond the walls. Farmers, smiths, teachers, healers, sailors, and lords all gathered together. Lanterns bobbed on the river, filling the darkness with gold and sapphire. Sky and Dawnstar soared above, their wings scattering flakes of harmless frost that gleamed like diamonds on the revelers' hair and cloaks. Jon danced with Daenerys, slower than in younger years, but with a joy undiminished by time. They shared old songs, the kind sung in Winterfell's kitchens and Meereen's market squares, the verses winding together until laughter and memory blurred. Children ran beneath the tables, some carrying wooden swords, others toy dragons. Raelle lifted one onto her shoulders and led a round of the council's oath, her voice clear and sure. "We are not alone in the world, nor above it. We are its keepers, its builders, and its hope. Let every hand join, let every voice be heard. May justice guide us, mercy temper us, and love renew us, day by day." Munda. When the feast ended, Jon and Daenerys stood at the Godswood again, the crowd drifting away, the last lanterns flickering. Equinox, old but regal, settled behind them, his body a gentle warmth against the autumn chill. Daenerys leaned her head against Jon's. "Is this what you hoped for, truly?" He closed his eyes. "It's more than I ever dared, more than I ever thought I'd live to see." She took his hand, their fingers intertwining as the first leaves of winter swirled down around them. "Then let's walk together, as long as we can." And they walked, two shadows in the lantern-lit night, the wolf and the dragon, leaving no crown behind, but a legacy woven of memory, labor, and love. Years slid by in gentle procession. Rael's son, lean and thoughtful, became the youngest member of the council. Eddard's daughter sailed to the Isle of Faces, studying the ancient magic with the Green Men. Linya, before her passing, saw the opening of the greatest hospital in the history of the realm, its stones carved with verses from every tongue of Westeros. Tyrion's last joke, recorded for the Hall of Companions, was about goats, dragons, and bankers, and was retold at every frost and flame thereafter. When Jon grew weary, he traveled north, Daenerys at his side. At Winterfell, they sat beneath the heart tree, their children and grandchildren around them, stories shared by firelight. Jon taught the little ones to track deer and read the wind. Daenerys spun tales of dragons, ships, and distant lands. One morning, as the snows deepened and the hearths glowed bright, Jon felt the peace he had spent a lifetime seeking settle quietly over him. He leaned his head against Daenerys' shoulder, closed his eyes, and listened to the heart tree's leaves. Its song was not of war, nor of loss, but of all things growing. Quiet, persistent, resilient. Daenerys lived on, her silver hair bright as new snow, watching her family and realm flourish. On the anniversary of Jon's passing, the dragons circled Winterfell, their voices lifting in a song that echoed from the wall to the summer sea. Daenerys stood in the godswood, her hand pressed to the bark, her heart full of grief and joy mingled. She returned to King's Landing for her final years, spending her days in gardens, her nights teaching children to read, to care, to dream. When at last she felt her own winter come, she called her family close, her voice steady and full. Remember this: every piece is made of many hands. Every hope is born anew. And though the world will change, the love you give, the justice you seek, these will outlast us all. After she was gone, the council convened beneath banners of wolf and dragon. They did not mourn in silence, but with music and memory and the planting of trees. Her grandchildren led the people to the godswood, where the heart tree's roots intertwined with those of a sapling, grown from Daenerys' own garden. The years to come were bright and troubled in turn. The world changed, as it must, but the charter held. Each equinox, blue lanterns and dragon banners shone, not for power, but for remembrance of those who chose peace and forged it, year by year, for all who would follow. And when new stories rose, of queens and dragons, healers and wanderers, they too began beneath the red leaves, under the watchful eyes of the heart trees, where the legacy of Jon Snow and Daenerys Targaryen endured, not as rulers, but as the first of a new world. Years unfurled quietly across Westeros, as the realm's legacy grew and changed, as inevitable as the shifting of the tides. King's Landing, once haunted by the scars of conquest and rebellion, stood proud upon its 7 hills. Ivy crept along whitewashed stone, where wildfire once raged. Children played in the city's wide avenues beneath banners, stitched not just with direwolf and dragon, but the blue flame of healers, the tree of unity, the silver coin of the guilds, and the open hand of the council. The air in the capital buzzed not with fear but with purpose, the rhythm of markets, laughter, and debate. Every equinox brought a season of renewal, marked by blue lanterns, lighting windows from dawn to the wall. The festival of frost and flame began with the dragons, Equinox and his daughters Dawnstar and Sky, sweeping low over the city in twin spirals, scattering harmless frost and breath of fire that left the city roofs wreathed in mist and rainbow for an hour. No longer did people cower at the sight. They lifted children to the sky in welcome, a living sign that what once divided could now protect. Jon and Daenerys watched these wonders from a quiet balcony above the godswood. Their hands, aged but strong, clasped together as they shared silent pride in the world their labors had shaped. The Red Keep had changed in their lifetime. The Iron Throne, long melted, reforged into plows and bridges, had been replaced in the council hall with a round table of weathered wood. Sunlight streamed through stained glass in every hue of the realm, It cast rippling color on their faces as Daenerys turned to Jon, her eyes reflecting not firelight but hope. Below, their descendants mingled with every class of Westerosi. Rael, stately and sharp-minded, speaking with the youngest guildmaster of the Tanners. Eddard, his dark hair flecked with gray, discussing road repairs with an ironborn counselor and the master of lanterns from the Reach. Linya, Water's grandniece, clad in healer's blue, laughing with maesters and wak. Even Tyrion's great-nephew, clever and charming, presided at the market, telling stories to children about the days when giant wolves and living dragons made peace with a kiss, not a sword. It was a peace that had not come easily. Even now, cracks sometimes appeared, the world testing its boundaries, pushing at the charter's seams. When a strange summer storm battered the Westerlands and a river broke its banks, grain from the north and the Reach was loaded onto Dragonback and rushed to starving villages. When a ship carrying healers to the Summer Isles vanished at sea, the council paused, mourned, and redoubled efforts to keep the trade routes safe. When a zealous septon in Old Town tried to raise a mob against Linya's order, Rael herself rode south, walked among the angry crowd, and by nightfall had turned their fears to curiosity and respect. Jon, no longer the king but never without a voice, found meaning in these moments, settling disputes not with swords but with steady words and a reputation for fairness that stretched from Bear Island to Dorne. He traveled often with the Daenerys, sometimes in disguise, learning anew the troubles and dreams of the small folk. In the bustling port at Salt Pans, he helped repair a levee after a flood, and in the green hills of the Trident, he listened to 100 voices at a harvest moot, promising only to listen and bear their needs to counsel. Daenerys, though her silver hair now gleamed white in the sun, remained a force of nature. She moved with the patience of a farmer and the decisiveness of a commander, her laugh brightening every room. Her counsel sought by healers, shipwrights, and queens alike. When she spoke to a gathering, be it the Hall of Companions or a muddy crowd of shepherds, her words were not those of a distant monarch, but a mother of the realm, fierce and loving and utterly present. The world beyond Westeros watched and learned. The free cities sent their brightest scholars to apprentice in the blue-lanterned halls. Even the remnants of Valyria sent gifts, glass knives, ancient maps, and a single egg that never hatched, placed in the God's Wood as a reminder that not every promise must be fulfilled for hope to endure. The Summer Isles offered seeds, spices, and tales, and in time, children of Summer and Westeros alike grew up learning both languages, both songs. Yet the world was not without threat. The Ironborn, having gained their place in council, sometimes bristled under laws they once scorned. Now and then, a new Kraken prince would rise and test the charter, sending ships into forbidden waters. But these raids never lasted. The council's response was swift, not cruel. Trade closed, privileges suspended, and always a hand extended to the island's people. Come back to the table, join the world again. Trouble sometimes came not from swords, but from sickness. One winter, a strange fever swept the Stormlands, robbing the strong of speech and the young of breath. Linya's healers came, Daenerys at their head, and it was Equinox's frost flame, gentled through glass tubes, that cooled the dying, giving the healers time to save many lives. When the fever passed, it left the South grateful, and every harvest festival that followed, the people of Storms and sent up blue lanterns in thanks. Jon, for all his years and honors, remained most at home beneath the open sky. He hunted with grandchildren in the Godswoods of the North, told ghost stories by firelight, and walked the wall with wildlings who remembered when he had been their Lord Commander. The wall, though broken in places, was now a monument, its gaps filled with trees and gardens, wildlings and rangers together patrolling its length. Where once it was a barrier, now it was a meeting ground, and children played on stones older than memory. In time, even the Night's Watch changed. No longer a place of exile, it became a school and a refuge, teaching the ways of wood and wind, old magic and new magic and new. The first woman to lead the watch was of free folk blood, and her oaths, spoken before a gathering of every clan and house, were heard in every council hall. As Jon's hair thinned and his step grew slower, he found peace not just in the world's order, but in its constant renewal. He and Daenerys watched their grandchildren take the council's oath under the heart tree, watched Rhael pass the blue lantern to the next healer's order, watched Eddard's daughter recite the charter in the summer tongue. They shared pride and sorrow, watched old friends pass, Tyrion, Gendry, Linya, Sansa, and welcomed new ones into the fold. In his last years, Jon returned to Winterfell, where the godswood flourished. He spent his mornings walking the shadowed paths, his afternoons teaching the children to track, to listen, to choose their words with care. In the evenings, Daenerys joined him, and together they watched the stars. On the final spring of Jon's life, a great storm battered the north. Trees fell, rivers flooded, but the people came together as they always had. When the sun rose, Jon sat beneath the heart tree, Daenerys beside him. He felt the ache in his bones, the old chill of wounds that never fully healed, but he felt also a warmth that nothing could shake. He looked at Daenerys, her eyes bright as ever, and squeezed her hand. "It's enough," he whispered. She smiled, her tears falling soundless among the roots. More than enough. When Jon passed, the realm mourned and celebrated. His ashes were scattered at the foot of the heart tree, his name carved in Old Tongue and Common. Daenerys remained for many years, the heart of the council, her voice and laughter binding generations together. On her last day, the city was filled with lanterns and banners, children singing songs of the Dragon Queen and the Wolf King. Daenerys, now frail but unbowed, walked the gardens with her youngest grandchild, told her stories of fire and frost, of justice and love. When the sun set, she lay down in the godswood, her hand on the roots, her eyes turned toward the sky. Dragons circled overhead, their songs echoing through the dusk, and the people of Westeros stood silent, heads bowed, as one era slipped gently into the next. The council continued. The charter was renewed. And so long as the blue lanterns glowed in every city and village, so long as dragons soared and wolves sang in the north, the memory of Jon and Daenerys endured, not as rulers, not as conquerors, but as the promise that justice, once chosen, could outlast even the longest night. E.K. In the years after the passing of Jon and Daenerys, Westeros entered a season of reckoning and quiet flowering. The world they shaped, built on long struggle, daily labor, and the courage to change, moved forward with a slow, thoughtful pulse, guided by the living memory of their choices. The charter, now more than 60 years old, had outlived the eldest of those who forged it, but not its spirit. In every corner of the realm, blue lanterns shone each equinox, marking the unity of frost and flame. The council at King's Landing, grown to 50 seats, included voices no one in the Old Kingdoms could have imagined. The Lady of Bear Island, descended from the fierce Lyanna Mormont, presided beside the merchant prince of Braavos, a Volantine healer, the speaker of the guilds, the high shepherd of the riverfolk, and a wildling who had once crossed the wall as a child refugee. 2 seats were always held for the next generation, their holders chosen by lot each year from the Hall of Companions. Rhael's children and Eddard's grandchildren carried the names of Wolf and Dragon in equal measure, and their council was known for justice, measured not in punishment, but in reconciliation and service. King's Landing itself had changed almost beyond memory. The city sprawled with new gardens and tree-lined avenues, the old sept rebuilt, not as a temple to one faith, but as a house of concord, where all were welcome to pray or ponder in silence. The godswood had spread, merging with the surrounding parks and feeding root and leaf into every district. The waters of the Blackwater ran clearer now, for the city's engineers, some trained in Braavos, others in Old Town, had built clever sluices and fountains, fed by aqueducts first dreamed of by Gendry and finished by his great-grandson. The small folk thrived as never before. Markets brimmed with produce from every reach, citrus and pomegranates from Dorne, winter barley from the north, fine cheeses and sweetwater fish from the Trident, and wines whose grapes grew in terraces, sculpted by frost flame. The blue lantern of Linnaeus healers became a sign as common as the blacksmith's anvil or the farmer's scythe. Pool houses, some shaded by ancient heart trees, others topped with glass domes, taught the charter stories, and every child learned to read, to argue, and to listen as well as speak. Dawn Star and Sky, the daughters of Equinox, ranged the skies each day, their wings folding shadows over city and field. Equinox, oldest of dragons, soared more rarely now, a living relic as much as a symbol of the peace he'd helped win. On festival days, when he glided over the city with his brood, all other business stopped, and even the hardest-hearted merchant would pause to watch. Yet the world was not still. Trouble did not vanish, it only changed. The Ironborn, now a fixture of council, chafed at every treaty. They sent their youngest to study with the wardens of the north and their cleverest to apprentice with shipwrights on the arbor. But still, the salt wind called, and every generation produced one or two who tested the laws. The council met each such challenge as Jon and Daenerys once had, with patience, firmness, and an open hand. More than once, a raiding captain was pardoned and set to building ships for the realm, their skills redirected, their pride remade. In the east, rumors grew of fire mages in the ruins of Valyria, stirring the old volcanoes and searching for lost eggs. The free cities, jealous of Westeros' stability, sent traders and spies in equal measure. But no foreign power could truly threaten the realm. Its strength lay not in dragons or armies, but in the shared purpose of its people. In Winterfell, the heart tree grew broader and taller than ever. Eddard's great-grandson, called Jon after his ancestor, was now Lord of the North, his sisters serving as Speaker of the Commons and as ambassador to Dorne. The Night's Watch had become a corps of scholars, rangers, and healers, its black cloaks lined with white fur. Its vows expanded to include service in peace as well as war. The wall itself was now a border in name only, its towers repaired as beacons and schools. The villages beyond it filled with free folk and newcomers from as far south as the Reach. Wildlings and northerners held harvest feasts together beneath lanterns strung from pine to weirwood, the ghosts of old hatreds receding with each new marriage, each shared winter. The Hall of Companions in King's Landing became a beacon for the realm's future. There, children of every background, bastard, noble, wildling, merchant, and free, learned from the best teachers and from each other. Every student swore the Companion's oath. We serve not for ourselves, but for all. We listen before we judge. We build as we have been built, and forgive as we have been forgiven. Nitya. Each year, the charter was reviewed and renewed. The process, more often than not, was noisy, heated, and full of disagreement. But it was never marred by violence. Delegates from the Vale or the Summer Isles might argue for days with those from the Westerlands or the Dornish coast, but the Round Table always held. Some called it a miracle. Most called it hard work. The stories of Jon and Daenerys, of Frost and Flame, were invoked less as legends and more as lessons, reminders that peace once won must be fought for every day in the labor of justice, mercy, and listening. No throne graced the council chamber. Instead, a great circle of stones ringed the table, carved with the names of those who first forged the charter and those who gave their lives to defend it. Lenya Waters, Sansa Stark, Tyrion Lannister, Gendry Baratheon, Arya of the West, Eddard and Rhael, and at the center, the joined sigils of the wolf and the dragon. In every village, on the eve of Frost and Flame, the tale was told of how a king once ruled who was not born to a crown, and a queen who remade the world with hope instead of terror. Of how dragons guarded the weak and wolves watched the wild. Of how love, justice, and courage, carried forward by many hands, had turned an age of darkness into a season of As generations passed, new threats arose. A blight from the east, a bitter winter that threatened famine, a rebellion in the southern isles. But the realm met each with unity, guided by the charter's ever-evolving wisdom. Old wounds healed in time, new joys sprang up in their place. In the 100th year after Jon and Daenerys' wedding, the council gathered beneath the heart tree at Winterfell. The air was cold and crisp, but the fire burned high, and voices rose in song, new verses for a new century, sung in every tongue of the realm. As the eldest of their descendants placed a hand upon the old tree's bark, dawn broke in a blaze of gold and red. The dragon's shadows wheeled overhead, and the promise that justice, once chosen, could outlast even the longest night was spoken anew, as it would be for all the ages to come.